The last decisions are in, and the wait is over. So let's meet our first teams for the upcoming match. The first, representing Oceania, please welcome to the stage, New Zealand. New Zealand features Captain Patra,
Did you get
Mage,
during that?
Jack Attack, and Ting Tong.
Group members, like group, and then tossed the stage as I was asking the question.
You didn't hear it before that? I heard it like 4 times.
Please go to your station. And their opponents from Europe, please welcome to the stage, Spain. Spain's captained by AK Wonder, Dale Som, Jacobo, and Riku97. Last time I checked, the Ginyu Force had 5 members. You should have included me on that one. Let's say we get some Hearthstone action underway. Let the Global Games Finals begin.
Okay, great introductions from those players.
We said the exact same thing. AK Wonder told us that's what they're planning to do. It's like, you need a 5th member, dude. Dan is right there, and he will happily be involved.
Yeah, I think he would quite happily join in. He's almost even dressed for the occasion as well. He's not too far away from the long shoulder armor.
As flamboyant as Captain Ginyu himself.
There you go. Would have been the perfect one.
Heaven.
More organization next time, Spain, but you know, the intro's all fun and games, but there's no messing about now as we are going to be kicking off match number 1 on stream for you guys of the Global Games here at BlizzCon. It's going to be New Zealand versus Spain, and we talked a little bit about the teams, but just to give you some background here, both teams went 4-2 in the initial Swiss stage of the tournament, then both teams won their groups in stage 2, and now both teams have lost their first match in this format of the tournament, so it's kind of crazy the way they've just been matching each other all the way, but this is going to be the breaking point.
Yeah, and just individual accomplishments on the team as well. There's many of them around. AK Wonder, perhaps the best record out of any player here. 3 top 8s to his name, even just in the last 12 months. Riku as well was 1 game away from an HCT Championship qualification performance, and then Jack Attack, the winner of HCT Sydney as well. And then if you want to go further back than that, Mage had a fantastic year the year before as well.
Yeah, he did, and a thing to note about AK Wonder as well, he often wins in a quite flamboyant fashion himself, as well as he's had some of the more spectacular series and tournament wins in the history of Hearthstone, I would say, to be completely honest. He will find a way to win that no one else has ever thought of and thought could even happen. So I'm pretty excited for this match. But what do you make of the rest of the team in terms of New Zealand, of Ting Tong, Jack Attack, and Patra?
I think Patra has taken on a role really through both seasons of Hearthstone Global Games of being, you know, the organizer, the linchpin, the player that brings everyone together. Ting Tong is probably someone that needs to have a handle kept on them a little bit, because he has a little bit of a reputation for playing, you know, the memeier decks, you know, the lower win rate but more fun kind of decks, whereas that's not necessarily
not appreciated by Zottel in any way, shape or form.
Not necessarily what Hearthstone Global Games is all about. And then Jack Attack himself, I had the pleasure of, you know, being there firsthand for HCT Sydney when he won. And I have to admit, he was a complete unknown to me going into that. But as he marched through the tournament picking up wins, I would honestly get off cast and just turn to people like, this guy's playing really well. Like, why don't I know about this guy? So yeah, he's a very impressive player.
Yeah, well, we definitely know about him now. But let's check out just the team roster as well, because it's all good as well. Let's talk about, let's put some names on the board so you can see exactly who it is. Riku97, aka Wonder, is the captain. Dalesome and Jacobo, and then there's Mage, Jack Attack, Patra, and Ting Tong can be represented for these 2 teams. I'm excited to see what they can do, and as it's the first match we get to watch on stage, I'm just excited to see what they do how they talk to each other, how they, like, because they're all stood around one screen, how they look, you know, who talks to who. Does anyone stand back and just be quiet and tries to assess the game from afar to a certain extent? Maybe not literally. I don't think they can just take 10 steps back on the stage and like, right, get my binoculars out. But you know what I mean, right? Just take a step back.
And the one thing that really does need hammering home is that although this is a team format, the pilot is the pilot. That is the thing. You can give them input, you can use all of your power to try and convince them to do what you want, but the end decision is the designated pilot for each individual deck.
It's definitely why we wouldn't work on a HGG team, because whatever Sol suggested, if I was the pilot, I'd be like, I'll do this instead.
Yeah.
Just to frustrate.
And then we would come to blows.
Yeah. And then we would not win the tournament, and that would just be terrible. But anyway, it's about these players. I'm excited to see how the conversations are going to go, but before that, we need to check out the pick and bans and see what matchups are actually going to be played out. You can take a look here, just to give you a more visual version of the format. It's going to be a Druid and then Shaman banned out as the first ban, and the picks and bans are done in the order you see them right now. What can you tell me, Sol?
Well, I mean, Druid ban and a Shaman ban is standard on one side and speaks to a little bit of strategy on the other, because Shaman going down first is not one of the things that you would be immediately expecting. But I think what jumps out at me immediately on top of that as well is how low down we're seeing these mages appear. The mage does end up being banned from New Zealand as they pick up mage as well. But they are very late because, as I mentioned, these mages are a bit of a problem class because of the nerf to Mana Wyrm really taking away the one powerful strategy that they had available.
Yeah, and something that surprises me as well is Warlock being open for the last pick for Spain, and then Mage from New Zealand. Hang on. Mage the class from New Zealand. That's going to get confusing.
Yeah.
They picked Mage and then banned Spain's Mage out as well. So they're giving a lot of respect to a class that at the moment not a lot of players have respect for.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. But yeah, if that graphic doesn't make the format exactly clear for you, you start off with 9 and then it goes in a 1-2 pick and ban format until you are down to the eventual 5 decks that will be playable in the series to give you your eventual best of 5.
Yeah, and it always just, I feel like over even so many weeks of HGG, no one has had a strong handle on what this should look like. It is obviously based on what decks your opponents have. These deck lists are open, so all the players, all the teams know what their opponents have. So these are informed bans. They're not just banning the class, they're banning the deck list from their opponent, which is very important when we've talked in the past about Quest Rogue versus Odd Rogue. Those are two very different decks. You need to work out a strategy overall.
Yeah, and we've seen, you know, various strategies come through this point through the various weeks up until now where, you know, people would try and, you know, gobble up their own control decks on their side and then ban out the Death Rattle Hunters and the Quest Rogues from the opponent's side. And basically what you're trying to do is just get a statistical average strong win rate on your side, because you do then lose control of your queue order in the following phase, but the idea is to just skew the amount of decks that you have with favorable win rates onto your side of the board.
Yeah, and then as you briefly mentioned, phase 2 of the pick and ban phase is the order phase, where the players effectively just say, we want to play in this order, the opponent do the same, and then we play singular best of 1 matchups until a winner is decided by getting to 3 wins one way or another. We saw earlier Brazil just 3-0'd their opponent, so the first 3 games just went straight and simple, but we've seen throughout HGG a lot of these matchups do go to the late match, I'll say, and going for all 5 games. We can check out though what the matchups are for this one right now, as I believe we do have them available, and we can see what we're going to be casting. So it's going to be Mage on the Mage. That one makes it easy for us. And then AK Wonder on the Warlocks. It's going to be Mage versus Warlock first, and then we'll continue down the line. You can see with Hunter versus Shaman, Rogue Mirror, Druid Warrior, and then Warrior versus Paladin. And the names next to each class are the players who are going to be piloting the deck. They have full mouse control, if that makes it a bit simpler here, that no one else is allowed to touch the mouse apart from them, although everyone has input.
Yeah, and as mentioned earlier, this Mage from Mage and from New Zealand is one of the Murloc mages that we mentioned. You know, players really weren't sure what was going to be the best deck coming into this. Do you just want an aggro deck, even if it's a weaker aggro deck than the one that you could play prior to the nerf? Or do you go with a deck that really isn't too highly regarded in most matchups? It's good here and there, Big Spell Mage I'm referring to here, It can find a couple of matchups, but overall it's considered to be quite a weak deck in the meta at the moment.
Yeah, and especially in this format, I think the tipping point, although some players have brought Big Mage, the tipping point is you cannot choose your matchup. You never say, okay, I'm going to play Mage and it's going to be into this, which even in Conquest, if your opponent only has one deck left, well, one, you don't have much choice, but also you know what to expect, whereas this, you could be against one of 9 different decks and you can't really prep for it that well. I personally lean on the side of the Murloc Mage as a deck to bring to this tournament specifically.
Yeah, I think if you could, as we're talking about in the pick and ban phase, if you can engineer your opponent's lineup so they're left with a bunch of very late game decks but without an ultimate win condition, you know, like a Shudderwock or a Malagos, that kind of thing, then those are the kind of matchups that Big Spell Mage can kind of stomp over. There aren't that many decks that do that, right? Any deck that's trying to go to the late game has a 1 or 2 turn kill that just ends the game that Mage really struggles to resist.
And it looks like the players are just about getting ready. And as you can now see the way this is going to work, I described it, you described it, but you know, let's see for ourselves. All the players are crowded round. Mage is going to be controller here, along with AK Wonder in this first game. It does look like Spain are having a slightly off-center positioning. I'm just going to cast the actual positioning of the players in this tournament as it interests me greatly. But it looks like the game 1 is beginning. So first game on stream for Hearthstone Global Games here at BlizzCon. It's going to be New Zealand versus Spain. It's going to be Mage versus Warlock. Can the Murlocs get it done, Sottle?
I mean, it's not a bad-looking start. Murloc Tidecaller and some buffs are kind of where you want to be against a slow deck. Health buffs in particular when you're coming up against Evenlock, because that'll help you to play around Defile. It'll help you to get your stuff out of range of Hellfire clears. But Murloc Tidecaller really is the mana worm of this deck if you want to look at it that way. And it's still playable for 1, which is why we're seeing people switch over to this deck more and more.
Yeah, as Hearthstone has evolved over the years, the power of, and it's literally the reason that Mana Worm was gone, is the power level of 1-drops has diminished quite dramatically from the olden days a few years back, and Murloc Tidecaller is definitely one of the more powerful ones that you probably remember from the Murloc Paladin days not too long ago.
Sorry, straight away, deep in the tank, Spain. So do we tap on 1, guys? Yes, we do. All right, glad we talked that out.
This is the intricacies of playing as a team, because you might feel, on the other hand, just forced to discuss every play, which sometimes can just lose you time. We've seen in HGG a lot of rope burning going on that has caused some mishaps happen. Let's see what the options are for Team Spain. Vulgar Homunculus does line up very, very well versus this Tidecaller.
It does. Mage and New Zealand do actually have decent game against this, though. It's not the most explosive start, but, you know, Coin Seer into Seer potentially just to buff up this Murloc Tidecaller nice and big and then get that Megasaur to potentially land on that entire juicy board could deal with this, but the Homunculus is a roadblock at least for a turn or 2.
And also, so we can see that Defile is in the hand for Spain, so even if Homunculus doesn't get a kill, maybe it can set up some kind of Defile board through just the natural trades that are going to happen, because it has Taunt. So maybe some Fury Protect this turn after the tap, depending, could come down just to say it's actually just a 2-3 that needs to help chip away at these Murlocs. Because I struggle to see the plan where it's like, no, I need to save some Fury for late game for a Taunt. Because often if it gets to that point where you're in trouble, there are too many big Murlocs on the board that just power through a Taunt anyway.
Yeah, as it stands, just adding the Sunfury to this board kind of deals with the Tidecaller naturally, right? Like if it trades into the 2-4, then you have another 2-3 in play. And also, if you're planning to Spellbreaker the next turn, then having that extra power on board is great anyway, because then you can try and take your swing turn very early with the Spellbreaker, right? Like you remove some kind of big buff that comes down this turn, be it second Cold Light Seer or whatever else, and then you have this 4 power in play that you can then dish out and try and actually swing the board state towards what is in this matchup the control deck very early.
Yeah, and then we see Cold Light Seer number 2 in New Zealand's hand. So although we said, yeah, these trades line up, it's like, well, they don't have to. As the Cold Light Seer is going to buff the health again of the Murlocs on board, and it does mean they'll be able to get pretty decent trades, or at least get through this Homunculus while surviving at a bare minimum. So New Zealand can keep the pressure on. But already you can see just the delay and the pause when Cold Light Seer looks so obvious. There are queries over, well, actually, is Oracle Ping ever a better choice?
And I think one of the things they're considering is just, do they have a particularly sad time against Hellfire if they do this? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes.
Yes.
There's not really a lot they could have done about that, though. There's no real way to play around it because both minions that they're trying to trade into have 2 attack, and it's just the way that the numbers will line up. They'll be very pleased to see that Spain, in fact, do not have the Hellfire available, and I love pushing 3 there because, again, in the world where Hellfire comes down, that trade has to happen for you to make that big clear.
Yeah, these types of moments are just when you actually just bank damage you shouldn't be allowed, right? You gain 3 damage from nothing because the outcome is going to end up exactly the same. Turn 4 for Team Spain, though, doesn't really look too great because of the lack of development that could come from a board clear. And then anything else not really getting too much of a job done because of the 3 health on these Cold Light Seers. As you mentioned, Spellbreaker into trade for the Tidecaller, which is the scary minion right now on board, does get work done, but this Spellbreaker's already dead, it just doesn't know it yet. So we'll see what the options are now for New Zealand. That Gentle Megasaur does adapt these Murlocs and maybe allow for some good trades, or Divine Shield pushes maybe.
Yeah, Divine Shield wouldn't be bad here. But this is the curve that I kind of outlined right from turn 1, really, that they had this Coin Seer into Megasaur kind of line. And you've seen that AK Wonder and Spain have had about the best resistance to this as they could have asked for, apart from that turn 4 Hellfire, which would have been the board clear. And still, New Zealand are able to force through a ton of damage here. Lands the Wind Fury on both Seers, and with 2 Fireballs in hand, Raven, I don't think there was any consideration of trades happening there from New Zealand.
No, not at all. Sometimes you play... The game becomes very simple at certain moments playing an aggressive deck. It's like, if I do this, can I just kill my opponent next turn? And at this point, it feels like a strong yes, because it's not so much that there aren't tools for Spain, it's that there isn't mana to get it done. You can't do enough each turn to stop just Fireball into Fireball.
This play from New Zealand basically says to Spain, you're going to need 2 pretty specific cards to deal with us here. You need a board clear or a big taunt plus healing to be able to get out of this situation. Right. Because just locking out the board isn't good enough. Fireball into Fireball ping over the next 2 turns will end the game. However, with the benefit of caster vision, if you look down at Spain's hand, Hooked Reaver, Spellstone in hand already are exactly the 2 kind of cards that they need to get themselves out of this position.
It is, and as I said, the mana limitations on Spain, well, they also apply to New Zealand because it means that they can actually, or they can't, should I say, can't just double Fireball in the same turn, right? So need to spread this damage out. They do still have some Murlocs on board, but this Defile's going to get used to clear this off completely. And Spain might say, okay, this is the window now, the safety window we need to actually get something done.
Nightmare Amalgam off the top for New Zealand.
Pretty solid minion.
It's
3-4. It's not really going to get cleared up too easily. Because again, the constant question for Spain is, can they get that turn where they not only remove the threats from New Zealand, but they develop something on the board to try and get some initiative back? Because there's only so long they can really defend for.
It does mean now that any board New Zealand develop, they'll be saying to themselves, well, okay, if a Hooked Reaver comes down now, we have the mana to Fireball King at this point. So any board that we develop is kind of worth its weight in gold at this point, because we can actually push that board through the big taunt that the opponent might have.
This is definitely hard to navigate from Spain here because Hellfire now, because of that Amalgam, just doesn't do enough. It just actually just pushes the same amount of damage not Hellfiring would do, as it, the 3 damage to Spain actually just equates to the 2 Murlocs you would kill anyway.
And it's why the Amalgam was such a good draw on the previous turn, because there really aren't that many minions in this deck that don't die to Hellfire without some kind of buff landing on them. And with both of the Cold Light Oracles and a Megasaur used in the early turns from New Zealand, any minion being drawn was going to be quite weak and innocuous at this point. Amalgam was about as good as it got.
It was, and it's also just a lose-lose situation, I would say, for Spain, because, okay, say they kill a minion or Hellfire and heal somehow, or just play the Spellstone, well, then Oracle makes up a lot of the damage because it buffs other Murlocs with +1 attack anyway. Right. So it means that, well, they kind of just gain the damage you spent your turn removing, and they still have 2 Fireballs. They're still going to just put them to face pretty soon.
There is that 7-7. As I mentioned, this is why the board development was so strong on the previous turn.
Okay.
And now New Zealand do have a long game, but I don't think they'll be quite as excited about that Alaneth as you might think, because Their plan A right now is to end the game with these 2 fireballs. I think that Alaneth has to be a plan B at this point.
Yeah, I think the excitement comes from probably, I think New Zealand are going, well, if this doesn't work, if they have it, if they have something that allows them to survive, well, we can just say, right, okay, I'll draw my deck and then beat that. It's a very, very nice plan B.
So New Zealand here considering sacking the 1/1 Murloc instead of pinging so that they can develop the Grimscale Oracle instead. Yeah, looks like that is what they're going to go for.
Yeah, small considerations there. Because they could have pinged instead and saved the Murloc, but they still end up with a 1/1 on board and more damage anyway. So it does work out a little bit better in the end. And again, this Amalgam is just horrible. It is a nightmare for Team Spain right now. It's very aptly named.
And actually pushing this extra damage, I think, is quite smart from New Zealand, because if a Spellstone was in hand, New Zealand, having kept track of the damage effects that have been used, will know that it's a 5 healing Spellstone.
At maximum.
At maximum, exactly. So if that comes down here, by pushing through this extra damage, they give themselves a more secure lethal through Spellstone with Fireball Ping and the remaining minion attacks on the next turn.
Yeah, I think it's just a very well-played game from New Zealand in the fact that they've gone, there is too many questions for Spain to answer in one turn. I think we just saw as well, there's just a couple of glances over the desk because they are stood opposite each other.
From New Zealand towards
Spain,
yeah,
and they're like,
quick,
quick glance at, to Spain going, do they look happy? Do they look okay? Are they worried? If they're worried, then okay, we might go 1-0 up in this series.
Yeah, Jack Attack saying to Ting Tong right now, how's your lip reading?
Yeah, imagine if they trained.
Follow-up question, how's your lip reading in Spanish?
Well, that's going deep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prep for this tournament, but that is going to be the end of game number 1. AK Wonder and Team Spain tried to defend against the Murloc onslaught of Murloc Mage, but it wasn't going to be enough. And Team New Zealand take game number 1. I'm liking Murloc Mage.
You're sold already.
Yeah, 1 game, 1 win.
You don't need much convincing.
We won't talk about the fact that they might have lost with it in their previous series, but from what I saw there, that was just too quick and too much. But I do think the Nightmare Amalgam was perfect that turn.
Yeah, the opener was good, and then the Nightmare Amalgam was just that last piece of pressure that they needed on the exact perfect turn that they needed it. But let's rewind to the opening and again just talk about the implications of the lack of Mana Worm, because they very much did win that game through the power of budget Mana Worm, right? They got a 1-drop down and then they just snowballed it with their buff cards, curved into the Megasaur. That created just this obnoxious board state that was very difficult to deal with. Spain came up with the Defile, but then it was just that free pressure turn, and that's where the Amalgam draw really ended up sealing the game.
And it was building the Defile was too hard for Spain, I think, because they had to go, okay, Spellbreaker, I still take damage next turn because there were still minions alive, and then trade, and then do a Defile with a 4-attack minion on board, where normally you kind of want that Spellbreaker to live to put the aggressive stance against the Murloc Mage to be able to say, now you have to kind of deal with this because you're getting beat down, and that's not how it should go for that matchup. But New Zealand go to a 1-0 lead over Spain, and they can continue and keep fighting for their chance in the tournament. Find out after this.
Welcome back to the Hearthstone Global Games. New for the 2nd season, we're proud to introduce HGG Cheer. Cheering is a way to show support for players and regions while boosting your presence in chat using bits, a virtual good you can buy on Twitch. Along the way, you'll unlock Hearthstone packs, new Twitch emotes, and a unique card back, while the players earn a share of the revenue. We'll see you in the tavern.
In the Overwatch League, you're hyping up the chat, taking your team to #trending, and spreading memes at tracer level speed.
while watching us cap the point.
Speed like that deserves a network that can keep up. With T-Mobile, get all the Overwatch League you can handle with coast-to-coast coverage. Now your arena is where you make it.
The 2018 Hearthstone Global Games are brought to you in part by Republic of Gamers, Corsair, T-Mobile, Samsung SSD, and NVIDIA.
Welcome back, everyone, to the first match and stream of the Global Games here at BlizzCon. We just had New Zealand take Spain's first win there off them with the Mage going against the Warlock. It's a pretty sick and pretty quick game, I would actually say. One of the quicker ones we've seen in the Global Games is we've had some pretty slow slobber knockers, I'd say, of some control matchups. But New Zealand not messing about with that aggro deck. But there's plenty more games to play out here as one of the teams does have to win 3 to be able to move on and fight for their life in this tournament. This is an elimination match. The loser of this one goes home.
Yeah, what was that, turn 7 lethal we ended up with there from the Murloc Mage, I believe. Yeah, they'll take that. If they can win all of these games on turn 7, they'll consider that a job well done, and they'll put their feet up for a bit and push us ahead of schedule. But I'm imagining with some of the decks that we have remaining that things are going to slow down just a little bit from here.
I think so. It looks like we've got Hunter versus Shaman coming up next. And what have these players bringing? What's New Zealand's Hunter? I'm going to take a wild guess at Death Rattle, Sol, but I may be wrong.
You are not wrong. Yes. Give that man a medal, a cookie, and an eyebrow. And then, perhaps equally as predictably, there's Shudderwock Shaman on the opposing side. There's perhaps a little bit more room for variation, although I'm not quite sure. You know, you could still bring a more aggressive Hunter, and you could bring the more aggressive Shaman in the form of Even Shaman as well, that we've been seeing a little bit. But Shudderwock and Death Rattle, by far the 2 most popular decks.
Yeah, and what do you make of this matchup? Because I actually, as I do in most matchups, favor the Hunter in this one, to be completely honest, as I feel like they can put on enough big pressure that 2 Hexes and even Volcanoes do not deal with a potential Hunter mid-game.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Volcano, because that's the big one for me.
Yes.
It's way too easy for Hunter to make more than 15 health on board. Like, it's just free. Like, regardless of the death rattles that you have on top of that as well, right? Like, just getting a cube and an activator in itself often puts more than 15 health in play. So if the Shaman is going to win out in this kind of matchup, they're looking for techs like additional copies of Earth Shock, for example. Right. In which case, like, Spain have 1 in their Shaman deck. But yeah, the Hunter beating up these slower decks, that's kind of its job in the metagame right now. You know, the Druids, the Shudderwock Shamans, where you need to be aggressive enough to be able to go to the late game with them and then push past their win condition and be able to get your own. That's where the Death Rattle Hunter really excels.
And you can see both teams getting ready now. Jack Attack for New Zealand is going to be the pilot, and then Dalesome for Spain is going to be rocking this one as we get into game number 2 of New Zealand versus Spain. Jack Attack on the Hunter, and that was a pretty hefty mulligan, throwing away that candle shot, and quite rightly so, as guess what? 1 damage 3 times doesn't do much against Shudderwock Shaman.
Spain's opening hand, though, Keleseth, Earthshock, and the Glacial Shard. pretty much as strong as it gets in terms of an opening to compete against the deck that they're up against. Just to cover some of the tech options or the flex cards, New Zealand are going with a charged Devilsaur in kind of the floating beast spot in terms of their Hunter deck. So it's where you sometimes see a high main. It's where you sometimes even now see Swamp King Dread.
I approve that one, actually. That's got the Raven seal of approval as far as I'm concerned. But we're going to see the tracking in. This is a bit of a tough call, to be completely honest, because two of these cards you don't naturally assume are good versus Shudderwock, although Flanking Strike does have a lot of value because of early game Life Drinkers, Saronite Chain Gangs, and it does allow you, even though it's just a 3-3, to be able to push some damage. Charged Devilsaur's nice, but not nice enough. You really want that from Katharina.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you get one of those big beasts in your tracking pool, it always feels bad not to take it, because whether you take it or not, it's gone, right? It's not coming out of the Katharina pool anymore.
It's not a Stitch Tracker.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you kind of get this mentality where, well, I want to use that card at some point in this game, but it's just not a strong card when played from hand most of the time.
Speaking of cards, though, I do like Sandbinder. It's a card that was in the earlier versions of Shudderwock, then kind of fell out of favor a little bit, but I really like the power of you either draw Grumble with it or you draw Glacial Shard, which, yes, may not be the Grumble power level, but it is got a high power level in itself of just stalling out some of the more aggressive decks. And although Death Rattle Hunter might not be truly classed as an aggressive deck, it does just stop high amounts of damage coming in, as they're normally 5/5s you're looking at trying to deal with. Oh, and there's King Crush as well. I don't think there's any going to be bursty kills happening from New Zealand anytime soon.
There is not. There's a Witchwood Grizzly in hand as well, so New Zealand are getting very close to that position where Katharina can just end up being an 8-mana 6/6.
Yeah, Team New Zealand will just be hoping they just don't see another Grizzly the rest of this game, because you really just, even if Katharina doesn't Death Rattle into a beast, you want at least the first one. If it's the first one, then it's good enough, because then you can maybe mess around with the cube, because even cubing Katharinas isn't that bad, because it creates 6/6s on the board. Like, those are just powerful enough to win games, but you need something to come out from her.
Yeah, that's the key to Katharina in a lot of matchups, really, is that it just puts so much stats onto the board in one go that your opponent can't deal with it. So you get to cube the residual minion on the next turn.
Right?
It almost doesn't matter what it is. It's such a huge pile of stats that you generate afterwards anyway. Hey, if you get into the dream world and that ends up being King Crush, then fine, you know, we'll take it. But it doesn't have to be to win a lot of matchups.
This, I think, for Team Spain is a very tough turn. Maybe a little bit less tough now. Because they had options. They have Earthshot, they have Glacial Shard, but Glacial Shard versus Shore is limited because you know the minions you play get Rush anyway, which kind of negates the Shore not being able to attack. I think this is a good middle ground and doesn't commit too many strong answers, as Earthshock is often just too powerful against a cube specifically, or a Katharina if you think there's beasts left.
Yeah, and this Keleseth buff is huge on this Saronite Chain Gang as well, because playing a Saronite into a Shore, normally you're just going to get gobbled up. You're gobbled up by Flanking Strike on its own. It's just perfect to deal with 2/2/3 Chain Gangs. But the fact this is a 3/4 means Flanking Strike isn't that impressive. Spider Bomb actually doesn't do a great deal either, because the Shore can't really pick up a value trade first to then allow the Spider Bomb to 2-for-1 afterwards.
And also, it's dangerous as well. You just saw New Zealand hover the Spider Bomb, but if you run Spider Bomb in and it kills the same one you went into, the Shore doesn't even kill the one that's left, right? It's very awkward timing. Not enough mana to get, say, the Keleseth down as well to just make that trade clean and leave Shore alive. This is a risky play from New Zealand, but they have to get something done. They did hit the Chain Gang they wanted to, but it does come at the cost of Houndmaster Shore, and now giving a Shudderwock Shaman a free initiative turn with no pressure on board for the Hunter is going to be a little bit risky as far as I'm concerned. We can see is another Chain Gang, Sandbinder to draw. Just get Mana Tide down maybe with a hero power. A lot of these options are great because Hunter is not the best at answering annoying minions like Mana Tide.
It's very true. Eaglehorn Bow, very much a card reserved for a secret package deck at this point, so being able to come onto the board and answer key minions from the opponent is not where they excelled, as you mentioned. But New Zealand were looking for a free turn of their own very soon, so for Delta and for Spain, they might be better served just playing stats, just so that you know, New Zealand can't use that relinquished pressure just to have a free turn of their own.
Yeah, that's the fear, right? Because you have answers, but you would rather not have to answer the issues such as Cube. Just don't give them anything to Cube, I think is the better result. And they seem to agree they're going for Saranite Chain Gang, which is buffed by Kelsa for the second time. And then there's a Glacial Shard going down to lock out any weapons, and mainly just to get the dudes on the board, get the battle cries in the bank, and see what can happen going forward. Because I was going to say, a plain Grizzly against, say, Manatide would have been pretty good, because we can see no Hex, and then that means maybe Cube next turn on the Grizzly. And once you've got full health Grizzlies on the board, Shaman cannot really do a lot about it. They kind of just have to just hope they survive long enough at that point.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was alluding to on the previous turn, where if Spain went for a Manatide kind of turn, New Zealand then have a free turn of their own to just play a big minion or whatever they want to develop, and then suddenly Spain just don't have the stats on board to be able to remove it. They have to try and remove it from hand. That ends up being a waste of removal a lot of the time, even if they did have access to it. So this is the play that I advocated for from Dalsum and Spain, which is to just play stats on the board, just keep tempoing. You have Keleseth buff on your deck, which means basically anything that you can play is very, very powerful and a big threat that Hunter has to deal with.
And this is a horrible position for New Zealand. They just played their bit of stats, and it's not even close to dealing with the Shudderwock Shaman board. At this point, these feel like losing games this early, and it may sound a bit presumptuous, but both teams are on nearly full health, but you cannot fall behind on board against Shudderwock, because they shouldn't be allowed to be winning this.
Right. And now with the board advantage that they do have, now Spain can start to think about that Manatide play, that far sight to try and cycle through some of the deck if they need to. Because they are just running low on a few options here. They might just need some kind of power removal play or a quick Shudderwock / Grumble.
That's quick.
To be able to get over the line. And yes, Raven, 6 mana is significantly quicker than 9.
Yep. I will say as well, with one of the card draw options, I wouldn't mind the Ooze being paired. Yeah, it looks like Spain agree, because you don't care about kind of candle shot in this matchup. Get 4/4s on the board and just continue this pressure. You might just win with beatdown at this point. Spain can play Shudderwock next turn and summon, what, how many? 2 more 6/6s? Yep. So there'll be 3 6/6s on the board. Glacial Shard would have gone off to freeze something as well.
Yep.
I think we might just see a snap Shudderwock this turn. Are you feeling it, Sol?
And they get to ooze this weapon anyway.
Yeah, because the Ooze Battle Cry goes off. Okay, real talk. Are you walking? I think I would, because you've seen how bad their hand is. And you're going into the turn 7 and 8. 7's a weak turn for Hunter. And if they get Katharina out, well, they're dead by then, because Hunter can't beat 3 6/6s. They don't have the removal.
It's fair. There's a chance that Sandbinder gets them the Grumble at this point, right? So if they were to spend this turn perhaps playing the Sandbinder, get the Grumble in their hand just to kind of shrink that gap, right? So if they have their Shudderwock turn, and if that Shudderwock turn doesn't end up winning the game, let's say New Zealand do have like Hunter's Mark answers to be able to relieve some of the pressure, then at least any remaining Shudderwocks on the board can be grumbled back on the following turn to set up the infinite win condition later.
I think they still win. The best response is Hunter's Mark Deathstalker Rexar. It kills 1 6/6.
I mean, they could have double Hunter's Mark, yes, but I'm not. I agree, I wouldn't
But they can't play at the same turn.
No, right.
Which is the big deal, right? Oh, 7/7s because of Keleseth, I forgot.
That's true.
And the freeze went on the Grizzly as well. Oh, there's a mind control tech. That's definitely not the worst card in the world to draw. Takes a 7/7, but what about the rest is my question, Sol.
And a good question it is. You see Flanking Strike, just no real impact on this board state whatsoever. God. New Zealand probably have to play it just to get a 3/3, and they're debating which rather underwhelming target they want to fire it at.
Yeah. I don't know, Sol. I've not got the answer. Maybe Shudderwock to just think if you do somehow get any kind of AoE, that maybe that helps if you even survive long enough. It can help, like, the mind control tech plus the Flanking Strike kills one of the Shudderwocks. Maybe that's enough. And also, there's just the Earthshock for the Grizzly.
Yep.
Goodbye Taunt, hello face.
21 in play right now.
Well,
that'll do it.
That adds up to lethal to me, Sol. The Earthshock bypassing the massive health from the Grizzly. Life Drinker providing the extra damage, and early Shudder Walk sometimes win games. And Spain even it up versus New Zealand, going 1-1. High fives all around, get that first point on the board. And now everything that continues to be played for as New Zealand seem to be okay, just saying, well, those games happen, but Spain seem to be pretty happy there. And I want to imagine AK Wonder is the one who is behind the, yeah, just play Shudderwock, it'll be funny and pretty powerful.
Play Shudderwock, it'll be funny. What kind of man are you trying to paint AK Wonder as here?
Very fun guy.
Oh, okay.
That's completely fair.
That's fair. I think he's taking this a little bit more seriously than that, Raven. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree it was a strong and most of the time game-winning play.
Yeah.
I also think waiting was a most of the time game-winning play. They were in like such a powerful position at that point where they dominated the board, they got ahead of the game, they had all their removal left remaining in the deck, and the New Zealand draw was so weak that the King Crush and the Devil Saw had all not possible draws out of Katharina anymore, that they could have afforded to play the long game. But actually Spain not necessarily having all that information, that the Devil Saw was tracked over and that the King Crush was in hand. Actually their gambit to end the game quicker is probably correct in that position. I think they played it
funny enough, like the more aggressive line is often the safer line. It's not always being defensive is the best way to be safe and win the game.
Agreed.
But they did secure it out pretty nicely, and as well, even if we lived in the alternate version where they played the late game, the fact that Life Drinker was so soon as well, that's just the package is just done. They could have should have walked them in the most natural way. So
yeah, Sandbinder in hand as well to be able to get the job done with Grumble. So yeah, they would just had a very, very powerful draw there with that Keleseth opener, and New Zealand really just found it a little bit weak, but it really was that 3-4 chain gang coming down and being brutal. And I think New Zealand would have known that when they're playing the Shores. Like, if this is answered by chain gang, we're in really bad shape. But A, they have to have chain gang, and B, they have to have drawn chain gang at a specific point after the Keleseth was played. It can't have been one of the opening hand cards. If it was unbuffed as a 2-3, of course, that's a huge turn for them with flanking strike instead.
There's even a chance that they just win off the bat, even with the rest of the draws they had, because the swing is so hard. Houndmaster Shaw stays on 6 health, which again, outside of a Volcano or Hex, is just a big minion. People often forget that Houndmaster has a very powerful effect on board, but he's also a 4-mana 3/6. It's just incredible.
Ding!
I didn't say I loved it.
I mean, you did extol its virtues for quite an extended period of time.
I didn't know we moved the buzzer over to HGG. I thought we were keeping it separate, but never mind. So yeah, that is going to be 1-1. What deck list do these guys have left to be able to play out?
That's a great question, Raven. I wish I had the answers for you.
Okay, well, we'll find out in a minute. But in the meantime, check this out, as this might be something pretty new to you guys at home and here at BlizzCon. It's a Blizzard Esports app that's coming, and you can download right now. And this effectively means you can follow all of the Blizzard games esports off your mobile device pretty easily. Tells you when they're live, gives you results, scores, everything you need to know. So for me, Sol, that's a pretty sick app. I've already got it right now.
Yeah, and it's not just for Hearthstone, of course. All the Blizzard games are now available in one place. It's a fantastic app if you're a fan of any Blizzard esports, available for download right now on Android and iOS.
Yeah, and also, who knows, after getting it, say you only follow, you know, Hearthstone with us, you may actually get interested in some other games as well.
No, stay with us. Stay with us. With a real game.
We see the difference of who plays more Blizzard games than the other person.
Yeah.
This pure Hearthstone player to my left. But we can see now it is, of course, I did remember this actually, the Rogue Mirror from both of these teams coming up. And which rogues have we got?
It is, in fact, a Rogue Mirror. They are both bringing Odd Rogue to the party. No, they're not actually. Spain, in fact, is playing Death
Lying to us.
They are. I just looked and just saw like Firefly Coldblood. I was like, yep, that's an Odd Rogue. But no, then I got to 2 mana and 4 mana and so on. This is a Death Rattle Rogue coming out from Spain. And that's a deck that kind of flirts with the metagame every now and again. It's never really been around for a long period of time, but it dips its toe in every now and again, and there's always 1 or 2 players trying to convince you that Death Rattle Rogue is actually the nuts, but to me...
I'm one of them.
Oh.
I like this deck. It has just...
You've liked every deck and every card that's been on stream so far.
Not sure to work.
Okay.
Not today,
right.
so. No, in all seriousness, I think the power of Death Rattle Rogue is similar to Death Rattle Hunter, as it works in very similar ways, is you can have just that one explosive turn that your opponent cannot come back from. If you actually get something to stick on the board, then play Vial, and it just procs its death rattle twice. It's similar to cubing and proccing the cube effect minion.
Yep.
And your opponents just often can't deal with what comes out of that. They play eggs, but they also play the mechanical whelplings, which summon 7/7s when they die. And the difference between an egg and a whelpling is actually an attack minion. It has 2 attack, which means even if you just play it, you can choose to try and proc it if you want by doing some damage.
Always do.
Well, we will find out how it performs here up against what would have to be considered the more standard rogue deck of choice. But even on top of these, actually, I believe after deck submission for this event, players started to just reintroduce a little bit of Miracle Rogue back into the ladder metagame as well. So there are quite a few rogue options, and there's perhaps the most memey available. There's Malagos Rogue on top of all of that as well.
It's going to be like, most memey available? Quest Rogue.
Nah, true.
People are still playing it, Sol.
I mean, still plenty of people have submitted it for this tournament. It's a very real deck still in a lot of matchups. You know, if you have time, you don't need to go infinite with Giggling Inventor to win matchups. You know, that is really your anti-aggro card. So against the control decks, Quest Rogue's still very powerful.
Yeah, we will see what happens in this matchup, though, because one of the big cards here will just be the weapon for the Rogue, because it means that they can swing and potentially proc a death rattle, but most importantly, the weapon just deals 3 damage, which is great at removing a lot of these early odd rogue minions outside of a weapon attacked Hench Clan Thug, which goes to 4 health, of course, as I'm sure you all at home are very aware of Hench Clan Thug if you've played ladder at all in the past few months.
Hench Clan what? Sorry? What's that card do?
Thug.
What does it do? I've never encountered that card before in my life.
Well, we'll find out as it's in hand for Team New Zealand. Patra being the pilot for this one. And Riku being the pilot for Spain on this one. Crystallizer coming down now, another card that's gone in and out, I would say, of just, hey, 1/3s are good. And it looks like they're doing pretty well so far as it does straight up beat the Firefly 1-1. But now Spain have a few options based off whether they want to particularly eviscerate and clear this up, or more realistically, just get the dagger and start chipping away.
Yeah, New Zealand are playing the full suite of 4 available 1/3s, where they're playing Crystallizer and Diamol, and then on top of that, they're playing 2 Argent Squires as well.
There you go.
So they want to have all of the early drop available to them, as many of them as possible, because quite often the debate is, would you rather have additional 1/3s in your deck, right? Like you have your 2 Diamols most of the time, and then you're flirting with the idea of what are my additional 1-drops? Do I want more 1/3s, or do I want 1/1 Divine Shields? New Zealand have gone beyond that and just said, no, we're playing 6. Let's go.
I mean, I think a lot of players have gone off the stats of saying, yes, we've ran this, and 1/3s are very, very good.
Yeah.
And if you can pad that out a little bit more, based on the bans you're going to give as well, then it makes sense to me. I will say as well, this Eviscerate is extremely important, as we mentioned Hench Clan Thug earlier. Often comes out as a 4/4, and Eviscerate lines up very, very well. And it's odd that we see Eviscerate recently now because as a removal for Hench Clan, because up until very recently, it was always Odd Rogue or Quest Rogue, neither of which run Eviscerate.
Yeah, honestly, 2 of the long-time strongest rogue cards, Eviscerate and Sap, have just become so rare to see in the metagame now, just because of the particular rogue archetypes that have become powerful, just not lending themselves to playing those cards for various reasons. And
I think we might actually see the egg get developed here over anything else, because that Flame Elemental is going to need to be kept to either proc Eviscerate next turn on the 3-drop, or just be used later on if not needed to maybe proc the Elven Minstrel. Because the biggest deal against Odd Rogue is you have to beat their turn 3 in some way, and that is often a Vicious Fledgling or a Hench Clan. This time, though, it's going to be a Coin Van Cleef, which does not die to Eviscerate. It is very good heads-up play from New Zealand, I would say.
Yeah, and also going back to the deck building phase as well, I was talking about how many 1-drops they are running in this deck, and then when you're playing that many 1-mana cards, you know, they haven't cut any South Sea Deckhands, they haven't cut any Cold Bloods, they haven't cut any Deadly Poisons, they haven't cut any Fireflies, they're all there. So when you're playing that many 1-mana cards, suddenly Edwin Van Cleef, which isn't an automatic inclusion in Odd Rogue, starts to make a lot of sense. And I'm really fascinated by the 1-drop debate in Odd Rogue. I think we've talked about it on broadcast several times before.
Many times now.
You know, the Diamol versus Crystallizer versus Argent Squire thing, but I think these days in particular, now Odd Paladin is back, get some 1/3s in your deck, because that Argent Squire is just going to be a 1/2 a lot of the time.
New Zealand have solved our debate, all of them. Is the answer. Play everything, because early game is what's key here. We see Necrium Blade being drawn for Spain, and that means that on their second swing of the Death Rattle, in case you're not so familiar with this version of Rogue, the second swing procs a Death Rattle on board, similar to Play Dead from Hunter. It's not going to be equipped this time, and instead, Riku and Team Spain are going to get some damage onto this Van Cleef, lining up this Eviscerate, if possible, next turn to pair with the Blade. Okay, so this is going to be a tough one, though. They do know that Fungomancer is not going to be available to actually buff up this Van Cleef, so this is a guaranteed kill with the Eviscerate next turn. But is it just going to be too much damage? New Zealand still have a choice between Hench Clan Thud, having a SI7 agent procced with a Firefly, or the Deckhand as well, because all of this can be played. The Deckhand does gain charge from the dagger being equipped, so I do feel like Patra and Team New Zealand are doing extremely well. Staying pretty ahead here. Looks like there's a lot of debate as well on Team Spain's side. Something I do like to do often, and this is even more so in HGG here, is that just talking about, or casting from the cameras, I like to do, where we actually just see how much talking is going on between these players, because a lot of the time during HGG, we didn't actually get to see all of the players talk because they often weren't physically together.
Yeah, and it's no great surprise to see so much debate going into this turn, because honestly, as you were talking that through, I was thinking it through, and I could come up with decent arguments for basically any of the plays available on that turn. They do end up with the Tar Creeper just trying to protect this Edwin Van Cleef as much as possible, but in the end, the Eviscerate is going to be able to take care of it anyway.
Yeah, that does mean that it's going to be able to clear it up and just make it a little bit safer. But the problem is that New Zealand are just going to be able to just keep piling on this pressure. We talk a lot about the power of Hench Clan Thug and the pressure it can put on, and they've not even needed it yet. They've got it for just later game and can keep the pressure with the 4-4, with the dagger swing, of course. And then there's still Firefly, there's still SI7 agent to pile on some extra damage. Riku does have that Cavern Shiny Finder to be able to draw another Necrium Blade, but it's just not really needed. It's not really enough. And as a 3-1, it's extremely easy to be able to clear up, and it also can't even be paired with the Elven Minstrel to help draw some better answers to the situation they've got versus New Zealand right now. It looks like Spain is struggling. I talked a little bit earlier that the rope does come into play in this format, because not only are you dealing with your own thought patterns and decisions in game, you're dealing with 3 other players that have all of their own thoughts. Maybe they've decided to say, oh, well, actually, I won't make a play until you guys or someone else has signed it off, so to speak. Okay, so Hardship Squire, maybe at this point there's a few too many 1-drops available, as there's effectively 3 in the hand, but still having SI7 agent for an easy clear on that 1-2, or to be honest for me, hero power and just get the Hench Clan Thug down finally. You've just seen Eviscerate, and that means that this Thug is pretty much uncontested, or very likely to be uncontested at least. Yeah, the Tar Creeper is going to be able to do a pretty decent job at just protecting these 1-drop minions on the board, but I'm very interested to see what New Zealand do here with this 3-drop. There's definitely a lot of discussion going on to try and work out exactly what to do, even if this is slightly off camera, but there's a lot of pointing and there's a lot of messing, but it is Patra who's currently the pilot, and she does have to directly deal with this turn herself. I'll see what it happens. Looks like, is that Firefly, Dagger, and Squire? Wow, Team New Zealand going super wide here and just saying, I'm just going to get more stuff than you. And guess what? This deck doesn't really run answers that are relevant here. And we see just Mechanical Whelp, SI7 Agent, Cavern Shiny Finder, and the Minstrel. All of these things do not really add up to a winning position. I talked about the power of Mechanical Whelp along with Necrium Blade and Necrium Vial, but guess what? 7/7s that don't have Taunt aren't really going to put a stop to just dying next turn, as there is 2 damage from hand in New Zealand. So Spain have a few options, but none of them look good enough. This could just be the end here, and New Zealand might actually take a game win. Looks like they are going for the Cavern Shiny find it. Just put the SI7 agent to clear off some of this. That Tar Creeper as well being gone means that even more of it can be cleared up. The Tar Creeper did a brave job, but it wasn't quite enough. So 3 damage on board, only 9 health for Spain, 2 damage from Pan for New Zealand. Is there any going to be any more off the top? It's just going to be a Diamol now. And that's not really going to be enough to push it. There is still just 2 damage. You can still, maybe Team New Zealand now need to go for more of a removal option, as all of Spain's minions are just frankly bigger and can actually get more damage done overall. Team New Zealand again deep in the tank, and we maybe saw 2 very straightforward games earlier from these teams. And the games went relatively quick in terms of turn time, but now we can see it slow down a little bit, see a few more ropes than we've seen already in this tournament. But where is this going to go? This is critical mass here. Is New Zealand just going to push face damage and just say, we're just going to dagger them in the face, worst case scenario? Or are they going to start trying to remove some stuff? The 3-1, very easy to get rid of, even with just an Argent Squire that's already on board. But the Diamol doesn't do much to help, even with just 9 health left of Spain. Oh, choices here. It look like Team New Zealand are just considering, do we just play the Diamol and get a free dagger up with the push now? Are they just going to dagger up and skip? And it looks like they might even hold everything. They're not going to play the Diamol. I think any other card they could possibly draw is an activator for SI7 agent. So they put Spain to 4 health. Necri and Vile, well, guess what? There are no death rattles that create taunt minions in the deck. So this might just be the end. I don't even think they can draw anything because of the mana cost in the hand for Spain, Necrinval, Minstrel, yes, you could draw some more cards, but no mana left to actually play anything. And it looks like Riku at 97, along with his teammate Spain, are just not going to be able to get it done. Are they just going to face tank this and get it out? See what they draw?
There once was a man from Gilneas.
Spine Slayer and Leroy. Well, they're a little bit far away from Leroy finishing up the game. And there's going to be New Zealand go 2-1 up over Spain. But all focused faces across the board there, as this is a pretty big deal for them. This is tournament life. Headsets being removed as they just swap through the players. But like I said, this is just tournament life for these teams. Everything on the line here. The loser of this match does go home. And the winners do continue to fight for their lives here at BlizzCon and the Hearthstone Global Games. Be right back with the next match, so don't go anywhere. We'll see who can take the victory and who stays in this tournament.
Welcome back to the Hearthstone Global Games. New for the 2nd season, we're proud to introduce HGG Cheer. Cheering is a way to show support for players and regions while boosting your presence in chat using bits, a virtual good you can buy on Twitch. Along the way, you'll unlock Hearthstone packs, new Twitch emotes, and a unique card back, while the players earn a share of the revenue. We'll see you in the tavern.
In the Overwatch League, you're hyping up the chat, taking your team to hashtag trending, and spreading memes at tracer level speed.
All while watching us cap the point.
Speed like that deserves a network that can keep up. With T-Mobile, get all the Overwatch League you can handle with coast-to-coast coverage. Now your arena is where you make it.
Wait. Can we have a test for that right now? Yeah. You want them to talk? Please check.
Hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Test,
check, 1,
can
2.
Sottle hear me?
I can hear you. Mic
Okay.
check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
The 2018 Hearthstone Global Games are brought to you in part by Republic of Gamers, Corsair, T-Mobile, Samsung SSD, and NVIDIA.
Welcome back to the Hearthstone Global Games. We're still continuing the first series of the day between New Zealand and Spain, and hopefully without any more tech issues. As we do apologize about that. We know there were some sound issues and you couldn't hear Sottle's lovely voice for just a little bit. But he's back.
Mic check, 1, 2. No, we're good. It turns out, after I was talking about how we don't really see sap in the meta anymore, it's because they're all being used to sap me from the broadcast. That's why.
All I'm saying is it wasn't me, okay? Before you, that was an accusing gaze going on there. But you know, just to round out the previous game that we did see, it was just the odd rogue taking down the Death Rattle rogue, and again, we kind of saw this in the Hunter matchup, funnily enough, versus Shudderwock, which shouldn't happen. But it's just the Death Rattle decks are just a little bit too slow. The second you don't get that powerful opening to control the aggro deck, it means that you just lose it. And we just saw, even at the end, Team New Zealand were just saying, now we'll just play our hand out because you do not have the cards really to deal with all of these minions, even though most of them are 1-drops.
Yeah, it was a shame. There was actually a couple of really interesting turns that I was trying to
I was just like, no.
It was like, no, if I can't hit you, I don't have to acknowledge you. This is my dream.
Actually true.
He just carried on. But yeah, I was kind of sat back watching it and enjoying some of the key turns. Tar Creeper versus Hench Clan Thug at one point, I thought was really interesting. Yep. And then as the game developed, it was just the more aggressive opener that ran away with it. But now, with New Zealand at a 2-to-1 advantage, they're going to fall back on their Druid to be able to close out the series. It's going to come up against Warrior from Spain, and that is going to be Mali Druid versus, predictably, perhaps the Odd Warrior on the other side.
Yeah, I think Warrior has not found much wiggle room, I'll say, in terms of deck. I know that Spain have brought the Odd Warrior deck that has the Quest, so there is a difference between just Odd Warrior and Quest Odd Warrior, but it is just a difference in saying, oh, I can actually end the control matchups versus, okay, we just play this out to fatigue and see who gets there. There is a small answer, and I will say as well, just to mention, Team Spain, and AK Wonder specifically, was talking very highly of their team's psychologist, who has actually helped them out a lot during global games in multiple ways, and pretty much said they would not be here if it wasn't for her.
Yeah,
he didn't actually give me a name, so I apologize about that, but there's the shout out, because he spoke very highly.
Yeah, I don't have her name either, but I do know she's of a very high pedigree. I believe she was actually the team psychologist for the Spain national women's basketball team as well before working with them. So really, she's just trying to monitor the way they communicate with each other, monitoring their mindset, trying to make sure they're in the right competitive place to be able to function at the highest level on a stage, on a high pressure environment like this. And as you mentioned, AK Wonder basically gives all of the credit over to her at this point.
Yeah, and this is going to be important as well, because if there's ever a point where your mental state is tested, it's when you are one loss away from being knocked out of the huge finals of the tournament you've been working for months to get to. And that's what's going to happen if New Zealand take this win with the Druid. New Zealand will move on to the lower stage of their group, but Spain will unfortunately go, well, not literally go home, we say this a lot, but they will stay around BlizzCon, enjoy the show. That's, I guess, the silver lining. We are at the best convention in the world.
They will be escorted out of the building immediately. No,
bags are already been packed.
No BlizzCon for losers.
Oh, wow. I'm glad I'm here then.
I kid, of course.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Jack and Bone has a pretty slow hand, as most Odd Warrior decks do. It's just going to be a lot of reactive play and trying to just hold out versus the potential extreme damage that can come out from this Malygos Druid.
Yeah, you pretty much have one job in this matchup as the Warrior, and that's to press the button wherever possible. We're actually playing some games backstage on ladder when we're just getting ready for this, and we're talking about how much different it is to know which Druid deck you're playing against, right? Because if you're playing against Mali Druid and you know that tank up is everything. You know that that's your key to winning the game, as long as you have answers for a couple of key minions in Lich King and Malygos and whatever else. When you queue this matchup on ladder, you have no idea if your Druid opponent is playing Togwaggle, in which case you have to do the opposite. Armor means nothing. You have to play your minions and curve out and actually try and pressure them. Or just concede. That's also viable too.
That's the real play.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we see Dr. Boom being drawn, and that was a question I was going to ask you. A matchup where Dr. Boom probably just doesn't even see the play, because the guaranteed armor up trumps the multiple different hero powers you can get, one of which is Blast Shield, which means that you do gain 7 armor, but that isn't reliable enough, at least in my opinion. You literally want to go max armor as possible in this game.
Yeah, the net loss on armor isn't huge, in terms of 1 every X you get the 7 armor hero power coming up, but sometimes you do need that consistent gain, right? Because you can't wait 4 or 5 turns to gain 7, because that allows your opponent to set up 2-turn kills in the gaps where they know that you don't have the armor gain.
Ion actually not bad, just as a playable minion and thing to do, because we talked a lot about you just armor up. You also can't just armor up if it's being negated by a Tyrant on board, because then your hero powers spend mana, do nothing at that point. So we might see the Hatchling come down just to get some work done. There's options for Shield Slam as well, but I think that's a bit too crazy just to deal with a 4-4.
Yeah, I want to go back to New Zealand's previous turn as well, where they had to spend the turn branching paths card drawing, which is normally a sign that things aren't really going to plan as the Mali Druid. Of course, a lot of intermediate players will think, well, you want to cycle through your deck and find your combo as rapidly as possible. Actually, the most successful Mali Druid hands are the ones that rely purely on Ultimate Infestation to draw cards, right? So branching paths can just be used to gain armor, just to get it out of your hand a lot of the time, or use it to buff minions to just push through an extra little bit of attack here and there. Using it to draw cards is usually a sign that you're a little bit desperate for missing pieces, which in New Zealand's case here was the ramp that they ended up picking up with the Wild Growth. They've been playing a very honest game here, and that's not what Druid is about.
Right, and one of the frustrations here is this hand actually, when you look at the exact makeup of it, is quite difficult to get rid of. Normally you see a lot of Druid players just flush out their hand before turn 10 if they have UI available, so they could just refill it safely, not overdraw any key cards like Malygos. And we see now just Faceless going down and saying, okay, well, this gets stuff out of my hand. I need to be able to empty it, because these swipes probably aren't going anywhere. Or this Moonfire.
I love this already, because already in this position in the game, you could see that Spain were already up to 12 armor. That's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger with a 3/6 taunt in the way. So New Zealand recognize they need some kind of minion pressure to keep this armor gain under check. It's no good just them now ramping up towards a UI and trying to end the game with Malygos burn combos, because by the time they get there, the Warrior's just going to be at 60, 70, 80 health with the tank ups. So Ting Tong and New Zealand just make the board play here, which I think is very, very smart for them to do.
Yeah, and quite difficult to commit to when it just doesn't happen that often, right? It's not your general win condition with this deck. So it definitely shows just a level of knowledge where you do have to adapt based on certain matchups.
Yeah, look like they're considering Reckless Flurry here, which would be a hell of a commitment just to get rid of this board, because that does a lot of New Zealand's work for them. They do get to stack 4 up on top of this, but you know, it's essentially as if this board has done 4 more damage, which New Zealand would have been happy with in this position.
Yeah. Look at this as well, moving on to the later portions of the game, and just 4 armor for Team Spain. It's really not what you're looking for. There's been a lot of pressure coming out of New Zealand somehow, and now this Nourish, ooh, indeed, Sol. This Nourish is bridging the gap, I would say, as to what they need to do. And look at this, a very typical play actually in Druid. One we were talking about, I think, yesterday or the day before, of the turn 9 Wild Growth, just to get stuff out of your hand.
Yep, just play it to play it. That Nourish was everything, not only because it naturally ramped them to 10 mana, as we saw the Wild Growth wasn't necessary, they just want it out of their hands so they can freely cast Ultimate Infestation without overdrawing. And to that end, the Nourish also let them get other cards out of their hand, discounting the Arcane Tyrant to 0 on that turn. That Nourish might just be that final ray of hope that New Zealand needed, because this game was quickly slipping away from them before that point.
It really was, and look at this now, even with the weapon equipped from Spain, it just doesn't really matter too much. Yes, they can kill the Ghoul and the 4/4 that's on the board with one swing, but they also just take so much damage. And the fact that it's not only the deal 5, make a 5/5, the draw 5 is the problem, because then you're like, they are just likely to have damage. You know, they're getting to the combo extremely quickly.
I love this setup from Spain though, because they equip it, they sit there, they make it obvious that they know what the opponent is going to do. But essentially this is Spain saying to New Zealand, like, well, what are you going to do? Not draw 5 cards this turn?
Right,
no,
exactly.
Of
you just play it.
I'm going to telegraph that I have the perfect answer set up to UI, and then you're just going to play it anyway because it's the best card in your deck, and your entire game plan essentially revolves around casting that card as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I wonder if actually we're going to see potentially a Reckless Flurry go down instead. Is that might be worse actually, because you lose the armor anyway?
Yep.
So do you just lose the health and then gain the armor and wait? Is probably a better idea to deal with the odd chance a Malygos just sits down on its own and you can take it out.
Right.
It's a tough call. But none of this is looking good for Team Spain, I'll say.
Those double shield block in hand could end up being a savior for Spain as well. Not just purely because it's armor gain that can pull them out of range of lethals, but because if they do need to answer a big minion, you know, a Lich King or a Malygos, the way that New Zealand have been keeping up pressure means that Spain haven't been able to stack that armor total naturally to then just be able to clean shield slap an 8/8 or a 4/12. So those 2 shield blocks in hand might be just giving that security they need to be able to do that.
And an absolutely fine burn from Team New Zealand there. Bye, Nourish. We didn't want you anyway. We've outgrown you. Now we see the Florist, Malfurion, Lich King. Malygos is there, but without anything to combo it with, not really worth it. But there's still plenty of options. Interesting to see whether New Zealand actually want to just try and play the Lich King just to get it out of the hand, so that Flores can actually get more of a targeted lowering of the mana cost, should I say, on one of the more key minions. But it looks like they're going Malfurion, and maybe they even play the mind control tech. Do you even need to hold it in this matchup?
Not particularly.
Or just deal 3 anyway. Who needs a 3-3 when your hero deals 3?
That was going to be my counter argument, is that 3-3 going to deal more damage consistently than just swinging that damage down towards the face that you have guaranteed anyway? And I think the argument says that if you can deal damage for free in this matchup, then do so. The 3-3 can always come down later. Just make sure you're pushing that 3 every turn where you can with the Malfurion hero power. Yep,
I like it. As long as New Zealand, which I'm sure they have considered when they can get rid of it, because you don't want Flores to hit it, right? You don't want a 0 mana 3-3 to just throw out there for no reason.
Right.
You really want it to target that Malygos. Bit of a weird board for Team New Zealand to try and deal with here. They do have a very high-powered Spellstone, maxed up at 6, so that Tazdingo, or Ascending Shield Master, if you want the actual name, can be removed very efficiently.
Tazdingo is the actual name, Raven. You know it as well as I do.
That's
Come
true.
on.
All right. We didn't even see that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Now Lich King down, picks up Army of the Dead with Mali and Dreampelt Florist already in hand. You sometimes just make those swing for the fences play when matchups are slipping away from you with an Army of the Dead, but it's not really what New Zealand are going to be looking for in this matchup now, the way things have been going.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it, and I don't think New Zealand care that much about trying to go crazy. I think they're in a strong enough position. But what's going to be difficult, and I feel like positions like this with Mali Druid, and a lot of maybe Tog as well, is that the second you swap your plan slightly, you can lose the game. You need to have a very strict plan, know it's the correct one, and then execute it. All of which gets more difficult when, as you can see, you are in-depth conversation with your 3 teammates trying to work out what that plan even should be. Because I believe, especially with a deck like Mali, multiple people have different ways to play it out, and there's not a particularly correct and wrong way to do it a lot of the time.
This is a nice swing turn, though, from Spain. That big game Hunter inclusion does take care of the Lich King. Super Collider swings the board state. Now New Zealand are having to play from behind a little bit, and this is where the matchup can change, because this is where the pressure is relinquished. Because the pressure is relinquished, it means Spain can now start to build some armor total. But crucially for New Zealand, they don't have to wait too long to get the pressure going again with a big Malygos turn, since they do have this guaranteed Dream Petal discount after playing the Mind Control tech out in the same time. And I think this is why, part of the reason why it wasn't such a big problem for them to not play it on an earlier turn, even though you mentioned they needed it out of hand. Any 10 mana turn they had available, they could just go Mind Control Tech and Florist in the same turn and still get that guaranteed discount.
The only worry there is, I completely agree, but the worry is just, if you get the Floop, for example, and then that changes based off the card when it changes when you play it. It can get a little bit tricky, but yeah, it worked out very well where they've just planned out and said, after 2 Tyrants, there isn't actually many minions even left, so it's highly unlikely they're going to draw more. Still, Team Spain have stacked up 13 armor now, so that, they're in a much sturdier position than they were. But can they really just keep going? Because they're just under constant pressure, which feels weird coming from the Mali Druid deck. Yes, these Tyrants have a lot to answer for as far as Team Spain are concerned.
Spain know that they don't have too much left to answer except the straight-up health total.
Is that a Dr. Boom I see?
Apparently it is.
Hero power as well, getting rid of this 3-3 just for the 2 mana that you had floating anyway. Not too bad. Did they? Okay. I was like, did they miss the attack there? I don't think so. Oh, Blast Shield next turn as well. Pretty big deal. And now this is where it gets really tricky, because New Zealand now have to work out every which way they can win and every which way they can lose, because Blast Shields can happen quite often, or this could be the only one we see all game. It's very tricky to maneuver.
already at 46 for Spain is a pretty huge total. They do have the discounted Mali in hand. They do still have Floop to draw. So the plus 10 damage Malagos combo is very possible, but still no Twig to really like max that out in terms of damage and like potentially add a UI on top of it afterwards as well. So for now, their damage output is looking like it's started to become limited about the amount against the amount of armor that Spain can generate.
How often does waiting for fatigue come into this matchup as the Mali Druid? With double naturalize, you try and just fatigue them for the extra damage you need to beat the armor.
I mean, I think pretty rarely, because you end up so far ahead in fatigue than the druid, than the warrior yourself, right? Just because you're playing the ultimate infestations and so on to draw from your deck in the first place. That trying to be in a position where even though druids can gain a ton of armor themselves, so they're able to win the fatigue race is quite difficult for them.
Something you do have to consider sometimes. You have to see these like niche ways to actually win games, depending on how they get played out. The second Diehorn Hatchling, though, a card that does help, especially in the fatigue matchups, as we've seen in the mirrors sometimes, where the game's just about how many Diehorn Hatchlings can you play on your side of the board. Spreading Plague, branching paths for damage. Let's go. Chipping away with this Malfurion for 3 is a nice heads-up call because of how early they activated it. Malfurion came down, what, on 7, was it? 7 or 8? It was pretty early. And those 3 damage, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, do stack up and change the game quite dramatically.
Yeah, it came down on 9 mana, I believe.
Which could be turn 3 for all I know.
No, it was 10 mana. It was post-UI because that was the turn where we had, like, was it Malfurion?
Oh, right, sure, yeah.
Was it just Malfurion hero power?
Could have been turn 4. No.
Who knows? Druid time, the world's greatest time zone.
These 1/1s are going to be able to help clear up one of these Spreading Plague beetles. It's not worth a swing, right?
I wouldn't have thought so.
I feel like the window is getting progressively more closed versus New Zealand right now, as they've run out of steam and they've not got anything to actually go big with the Mali combo. They don't have both Moonfires, they do have the double swipes, but no way to get there, and this Mali's never living. There's too much armor now. You know there's the shield slams locked, loaded, and ready to go. Or at least one is fairly likely at this point.
Yeah,
Reckless Flurry as well.
That's a big problem as well, because a lot of the time, when you start to feel the game slipping away from you as the Mali Druid, one of the gambits you can set up is you take your Mali turn and you double swipe face, and then that cuts off the armor total, so that they then can't gain 12 back again to be able to shield slam the Malagos. There's so much armor being built up now that it's even becoming difficult for you to even do that.
Just like, yeah, nice try, friend. Shield slam.
Of course, Spain have access to things like Iron Beak Owl as well, which can stem the bleeding. If they end up not having enough armor to be able to take care of the Mali, they can at least just reduce it to a 4/12, which pushes net 0 per turn against the regular Odd Warrior hero power. Of course, it will deal damage through the new Dr. Boom form.
That is Floop, though. And now, again, I know for a fact, I cannot lip read, but the team will be discussing, right, wait, how much damage can we do this turn? How much damage can we follow it up with? What damage do we need to do? Can we push damage another way? Do we hero power? Do we not hero power? 50 questions happen at once when you get Floop and Malagos, which is reduced in hand.
Yep. Problem with the Floop, when you have like the full discounted Mali combo, like when you have Mali, double swipe, double Moonfire available to you, the Floop combinations don't really add much damage on top of that, right? Because you're using all of your comboable damage spells anyway. It's not like you can then go like Floop UI on the following turn for extra damage. It's really like combinations with Twig where Floop really starts to do absolutely insane damage. And Twig, even if it's drawn the very next card, is a long way away from being activated by New Zealand. Thank you, Chucky.
So there's the Twig, locked, loaded, and ready to go. And the funny thing is, New Zealand would have time to swing it because they're not dying anytime soon. But Spain have a little card on the far left. I don't know if you can see it because they're holding quite a few. But it's in fact just an ooze, which says a hard pass on this big combo turn, and that might also be a hard pass on the game at this point. Going with a swipe right now.
I guess this is a signal from New Zealand that they have to cast this UI to max out on their damage here. Understanding that it's very, very unlikely this twig ever goes off and they get to have the full damage combo with Flute, Mali, Swipes, Moonfire's UI, whatever they use their twig refresh on. So just understanding that they need to kind of clear out some of their hand here.
Team Spain just burned the lease. Have a pretty large hand to get the game and job done anyway. But they just need to make sure they don't slip. But it's hard to when you've got an ooze to just beat Twig late game as well. This Twig literally just dealt 1 damage and cost 4 mana this game. You're looking at Daihon hatchling number 3, I think, this game?
It looks like it, yeah.
Oh, do you want that sweet reduction on the Dreadcore set?
That sweet, sweet Super Collider synergy. Yeah, I like the shield block timing most of all from Spain here, because that swipe on the previous turn was the first time any kind of indication that New Zealand might be trying to set up a burn plan. And straight away Spain said, okay, we'll just slam that last door on you and start playing out our shield blocks if we need to.
We went for the Steam Bot instead, just to say, well, if you do stick a minion, get through that. But it will still be cleaned up relatively easily, I imagine.
A tangled web.
It's kind of weird how quickly this game looked to slip away from New Zealand, and I think such a large delay between most of the combo and then a way to finish it, i.e. the Twig or even just having an earlier Floop to just pile on the early pressure.
Yeah.
Because at one point, we were looking at Team Spain on like 22 health, and obviously at one point, no armor, right? So that could have been dangerous. They could have just died, but the final piece of the puzzle did not turn up for New Zealand, and that might be the point that causes the end of the game for these guys.
Yeah, there's a few ways you can get through the matchup. You know, like Lich King sticking to the board, you pick up multiple cards, you know, just a quick Alex and then pressure off that, or just assembling like ramp into UI into Mali combo very quickly. And as you mentioned, New Zealand has kind of been one step short of all of those options. They got Lich King down in a strong position, but Spain did have the removal for it. They've been that one piece away, which was the Twig in this case, of being able to finish the combo. And even if they did get it early, the ooze has been drawn from Spain to be able to shut it down at any point they want to. So yeah, I think the assessment of just one step away is pretty astute for New Zealand's situation in this game.
Also as well, these like multiple blast shields are just looking good right now. They're just, you know, there was a couple of others they didn't get, but I think this is blast shield number 3 so far of Boom, which is actually just pretty solid. As you said, on average, it kind of works out flat, doesn't it? Except you get some other tools now and again. One shield slam used there to kill off the Matriarch, but again, it just has to be an assumption from Team New Zealand that the shield slam number 2, there's Reckless Flurry. That guess what, if there's double Mali get played and you don't die, who cares if you have armor or not anymore, as long as there's enough to clear the Malis, well then you win, because there's no way to actually deal any further burst damage and finish up the game. Not mind this as well, you float in the mana, and also there's no spreading plagues left. Oh, sorry, there's only one spreading plague left, so you just go wide for the minions. This becomes a very straightforward play. Now, New Zealand, having no cards left, just simply have to go for it and see what happens. Here comes the swipe. Double Moonfire for maximum damage. Always surprises me the amount of damage that comes out from turns like that.
Yep. And now the Iron Beak Owl is available to cut down one of these Malis, but there is no clean removal. So that Moonfire, being the last remaining card in the deck for New Zealand, has allowed them to push through the necessary amount of damage to set this up and potentially clutch out the series, because Spain are struggling to find a completely clean answer to all of this board state.
Yeah, I mean, you can swing the weapon into the 4-12 to kill off the 3-4 and silence the 4-12.
Yep. And put a Daihon Matriarch in the way of any more face damage, for example?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because also as well, as all that Spain have to do now is just survive a couple of turns, because UI will just kill New Zealand very soon. So they need to cast it extremely soon and just be able to deal with one more 5-5. Okay, they're going for this way.
Yeah, choosing to go for rushing Dynamatics here instead, which, yeah, if both of these hit 5, then the second Mally goes down to 4.
Yeah, this is way better.
So you actually end up getting a perfect full clear. You know that all your opponent has left is an unknown Lich King card and a UI. The other card, of course, is Spreading Plague. They will know that as well, but it's not relevant in terms of, you know...
Oh no, a 1-5.
Yeah, exactly. So the cards that they have to worry about are a UI and a Lich King card that could be damaged, be it Death or Decay or Death Coil. But in this case, it is just a completely useless Army of the Dead, and New Zealand are going to rip out the Ultimate Infestation, get their 5-5 on board, and this is now well and truly their final push. They need this 5-5 to clutch out the game for them.
Yeah, and we can see a Direhorn Matriarch in the hand, which just says, no. How about that? No naturalizers left, of course. No way to really remove this without dying themselves, as this fatigue is starting to add up. And most importantly, this Matriarch is going to kill this 5-5 if it trades in.
I think the looks on Spain's face right now is they're trying to work out exactly what this one remaining card is between them, potentially. I think someone just asked, so there's a shake of the head, like, yeah, I'm not sure what it is. And then there's options as to which Lich King card they can potentially play around as well, right? Because things like Obliterate could take care of the Direhorn Matriarch and then push damage, even though that's an enormous amount of damage to take yourself when you're fatiguing for this much.
Right.
But I think
Death Coil as well can be a problem, just to push face.
I think no matter what conclusion that you come to, Direhorn Matriarch and Zola just ends up being the play anyway. And yeah, there is the solution after a marathon of a game number 4. It is all square, 2-2 now. Spain picking up the victory and disallowing New Zealand from taking the easy way through. They're going to have to do it in the full 5-game series if they're going to make it through.
Yeah, and I did appreciate the Collider lethal to a certain extent. We were just a boop, 1 damage finally, finish off this Collider. It's hit them so hard, they just conceded.
Yeah.
Pretty good way to end the game.
Yeah, the Druid just attacked the guy next to him, and the guy next to him had 30 attack, and it just died. It was game over.
It's just the way the card works, obviously. But that's going to be evening it up. These games going to a final game number 5. Someone has to win 3 to move on. The loser is actually going to have to go home, unfortunately. Enjoy the rest of the convention first. But yeah, we're going to come down to this final game. Can you remember what the matchup was? Can we see the matchups?
It's all important.
Those are not matchups, never mind.
The matchup of Republic of Gamers versus Corsair, Raven. Who you got?
Republic of Gamers. I'm just going to pick one. I have nothing on that. I have no witty comeback.
You're just too nice that you didn't want to offend either of our fine sponsors by picking a winner.
There we go. Perfect. So it's going to be the Paladin versus the Warrior here. And which type of Paladin is this? I imagine it's odd, but there have been players playing even Paladin quite a lot.
They have, yeah, but this is an odd Paladin coming out from Spain. New Zealand have a very similar odd Warrior list to what we saw in the previous game as well. So you know, it's going to be an uphill struggle, of course. This isn't, you know, the Warpath Blood Razor deck that we're used to seeing. This is a trap that people fell into with Token Druid for a while as well, where they thought Odd Warrior just stomped Token Druid because it was a Warrior deck. The Whirlwind class. And that's not necessarily quite how it works, because the best cards for clearing out wide boards of tokens, which Odd Paladin and Token Druid generate, are Warpath and Blood Razor. And the direct replacements that Odd Warrior brings in, like the Reckless Flurries and whatever, they're just not quite as beneficial or as efficient or cheap as some of the tools that you have. Yeah,
for me, it's just all about Dynamatics, isn't it? Just to be able to, because leading into turn 5, if you can just clear off most of the board, well, the Paladin struggles to get back, actually, because often the Dynamatic sticks around as well. It's, as a 3-4, it trades very well with a lot of Paladin minions, and that's on top of anything else that may be there. There's probably, you know, potentially an Ooze in there to get rid of Vine Cleavers that can, again, help Paladin with the late game. There's a lot of options that Warrior can just put a hard foot down, but I feel like the second the Warrior doesn't have access to that option at the right turn, Paladin just go, oh, by the way, you're dead.
Yeah. I mean, that's... You're basic. That's
hey, you got it. Yes.
That's it's a swing turn, right? That's the big deal. It's not just a removal turn. That's why you mentioned Dynamatic specifically. It's a turn that kills your board and actually builds a platform that you can then use to trade with, like a Void Ripper that gets played the next turn, or just one of the next minions that gets played at least is being dealt with by that 3/4 body. And that's kind of the equity that Ob Paladin deals with, is just getting too many bodies on board for you to deal with. And the best way to fight back against that is get bodies in play yourself, not just play removal from hand the whole time.
Yeah, become the aggro deck. Yeah. That's the best way. But I think the players are just getting ready for this next game, and they're probably trying to just calm each other down. I wonder...
Stakes are huge at this
That's a good point. Like, I wonder, in each team, I'm pretty sure there'll be one person who's more of a, like a calming presence than anyone else. Because I feel like that would be me in a team where, I might not be, maybe might not be the best player, might not, depending on the team. Might not be the leader, but I'll be the one where it's like, guys, just breathe, take a second, chill, and then refocus. That would be my job. It's like it's my job on the caster team, I'm going to be honest.
I think if I had to focus and stay calm during a high pressure moment, your job would be to not talk to me at all.
Yeah, that's why I said depend on the team.
Yeah,
so.
okay. I think speaking for New Zealand though, Mage is probably for me the most cool, calm and collected player that we've seen there. He also has the largest stage experience, where last year he did qualify for an HCT championship event. Yes, Jack Attack is a Sydney Tour Stop champion, but one step beyond that in the championships.
Go on. I think you're forgetting about someone. Patra last year on this very stage, very stage, lifted the trophy as a BlizzCon winner.
That's something that we haven't talked about really, right? The potential.
I was waiting for the right moment.
The potential for Patra to be a repeat back-to-back BlizzCon champion.
That's a big deal.
It is kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
but I would, going back to the original point, I would peg Mage as like the biggest calming influence on the side of New Zealand. On Spain's side, I don't know. I just know that it won't be AKA one.
No, I
do not believe him to be a calming presence in any situation.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like we love AKA Wonder. He's just fun to be around for a start. But I think like it's a very much double-edged sword for me in a situation like this, because he gets people fired up. Yeah. He's always full of energy. But is that what you need right now? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But for me, I think I would need everyone to just breathe and refocus.
I mean, AK Wonder in a nutshell, rewind all the way back to, I believe, 2016 HCT at the time. Most players, when we see them in Hearthstone, achieve some massive moment of victory, whether it be winning a tournament, qualifying for a tournament. Yeah. It's just maybe like a little one of these, like, yeah, I id it, this is great. AK Wonder, when he qualified for his first championship, playing a triple Cthulhu lineup, I believe it was at the time, let out what can only be described as a war cry upon victory. It shook the building he was in.
I also remember as well, he won a match, I think it was like a top 16 or top 8 match at DreamHack, and he just went, yeah, I did that. And then he went, oh, sorry, and said sorry to his opponent, who was obviously sat opposite him, because he realized like shouting when someone's just lost right in front of you, maybe not the nicest or best thing to do, but it was so natural.
Do you remember what that game was?
It was the Babbling Book, right?
Glyph, yeah, Book into Glyph into Fireball, I believe, was the sequence.
It was the only way to win the game.
Absolute madness, and he stands up, pops off pretty much right in his opponent's face, just because the emotion gets him carried away, and then immediately realizes what he's done, apologizes, turns around, and just pops off to the crowd instead, which is a much
just
better way.
aim it in the correct direction, and it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I think we're going to see very shortly, as the players are almost ready to get into the game, to see who is going to maybe take control, not specifically of the mouse as the pilot, but maybe take control of the team, as this one's going to be, I think, over pretty quick, mainly because Warrior has a way to Warrior has a way to shut down the late game of the Paladin. Yeah. Because they'll have drawn enough, you would assume, at that case. But Paladin can also run away if Warrior leaves it with a gap.
Yeah, I think whether or not we necessarily see a concession from the Paladin, if it is over from their side, I think it will clearly be over quite quickly one way or the other. Either Warrior will gain control or they will die very quickly. But yeah, it's huge stakes at this point, because again, remember, we've actually skipped a opening round in terms of broadcast. Every initial match was played before we even started, so these are now elimination matches, meaning both of these two teams now stare 2 games to 2, staring at elimination if they can't pick up this third game win.
Yeah, and also as well, I did just slightly lie to you. The players are getting ready for the match, but they need just a little bit more time. As we said, this is the final game of the series, so don't go anywhere, guys. We're going to be right back with some more Hearthstone Global Games.
Welcome back to the Hearthstone Global Games. New for the second season, we're proud to introduce HGG Cheer. Cheering is a way to show support for players and regions while boosting your presence in chat using bits, a virtual good you can buy on Twitch. Along the way, you'll unlock Hearthstone packs, new Twitch emotes, and a unique card back, while the players earn a share of the revenue. We'll see you in the tavern.
In the Overwatch League, you're hyping up the chat, taking your team to hashtag trending, and spreading memes at tracer level speed.
All while watching us cap the point.
Speed like that deserves a network that can keep up. With T-Mobile, get all the Overwatch League you can handle with coast-to-coast coverage. Now your arena is where you make it.
The 2018 Hearthstone Global Games are brought to you in part by Republic of Gamers, Corsair, T-Mobile, Samsung SSD, and NVIDIA.
We are back here at the Hearthstone Global Games, and in case you decided to sleep in a little bit or go to bed at the wrong time, depending on time zone, I guess, because we are over in America. We are just about to finish up the first match on stage between Spain and New Zealand, both teams at 2-2, and it all comes down to this last game. Loser goes home, winner just about stays in the tournament.
Yeah, Odd Paladin versus Odd Warrior is the matchup that we're going to have, which, as we said, is perhaps, not as bad as some people might think it is, but, still an uphill climb. Just purely the amount of damage, the amount of removal, the amount of taunt, the amount of potential rush minions coming out that you have to deal with, and of course, Dynamatics on top of all of that, as Raven was outlining before we took our quick break. But still, everything on the line, because this is an elimination match for these two teams. They've already been defeated once to be put in this point. So they cannot afford this game loss, because that would equate to their second match loss, and it would mean the end of their BlizzCon as far as Hearthstone Global Games is concerned.
It really would. Can still hang around to check out the rest of the tournament, everything else that's going on here at BlizzCon, as there are many, many things happening for the next 2 days. Let's take a look at the players. New Zealand on your left, Spain on your right, Mage being the pilot and the controller of the actual plays in this game, and Riku representing Spain there in the middle, being able to be the pilot for those guys. And it's all going to be important. I love that. I wonder if they've just like shunted AK Wonder to the edge. It's like, okay, you just stay over there and calm down. You just chill. We'll be fine, promise, as we go into the final game of the series, New Zealand versus Spain. It all comes down to this one. It's Warrior versus Paladin. And let's see what happens. Both teams not with the most crazy opening hand, I would say, pre-Mulligan.
No, Divine Favor is a power card in the matchup for sure. It's very hard for Odd Warrior to just play cards out of their hand to play around Divine Favor a lot of the time. But it's not necessarily something you need to keep in your opening hand because it's more important to get that consistent start going a lot of the time and push through damage because, quite honestly, in my opinion, when you get to the position in the game where you're emptying your hand as the Paladin and then you cast the Divine Favor, you're already in warrior country at that point, right? Like you're
across the border.
Exactly. You're reaching turn 7, turn 8, that kind of position where the warrior can really start take control of the matchup.
It really is, because again, you start to look at this, and it seems very strange for both ways because cards like Ziliax are still just a problem because if they beat down armor, it heals and it still requires multiple attacks to go through.
Yeah.
So see what happens here. The mulligan, the Divine Favor was kept, and then there's Firefly, and then the Raid Leader along with that Hero Power, of course, always present with the odd Paladin deck. Whereas New Zealand, not looking too hot, at least for the immediate early game. Shield block, not too bad to just cycle through and skip through some of the deck. Oof, good hammer.
Yep.
I love it already.
That's like Dalesome in the background really leading the conversation on this opening, and I think that this is just long-term planning here in terms of what does our curve look like over the multiple turns to come, not just considering whether they play Firefly on one.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one, because I feel like with Odd Paladin, because of your hero power is so good in almost every situation, you really need to plan it out to be most mana efficient as possible to create as much pressure as possible every single turn. Because I feel like the second you don't do it well one turn, you've just given your opponent a huge window to actually make a comeback in any given game.
Let me think.
Very tough as far as I'm concerned. Even now, hero power, does Coin Weapon do anything better? Do you put 2 1-drops as a 1-2 and a 1-3 instead of just 2 1-1s? Then are you afraid of, or are you not afraid of just having the hero power? Because as you mentioned earlier, there aren't really any whirlwind effects that are natural. It's Dynamatic, which deals 1 damage.
Double 1-drop here instead of the hero power. This is a signal from Spain, in my opinion, that they want to rush through to this Divine Favor as quickly as possible. And so they're perhaps looking at a 3-drop into Coin Fungalmancer into then that's the Divine Favor turn on 5 potentially. But still, it's always a sign of something potentially amiss when the hero power doesn't come down on turn 2 when you're playing cards instead. But I think in this position, it is perhaps justifiable.
Yeah, I think as well there's something to be said of Spain kept Divine Favor and they are playing like they want to cast Divine Favor.
No, absolutely, it's consistent.
And that's correct, but you also don't want to get locked into a plan before the game's even started, right? Because you don't want to say, oh, well, we really want to cast this Divine Favor, so let's just do this, because it makes it a little bit better. So I do think it's the right play, but I think it's important to keep an eye on how it progresses here, as we do see Dynamatic in Mages and Team New Zealand's hand right now, along with Mind Control tech, a Brawl, even the Direhorn Hatchling is a little bit awkward for Paladin to deal with due to its high health total. So what I'm saying is, Team New Zealand have some pretty good cards in the hand.
They do. That is basically a greatest hits of this matchup there in New Zealand's hand.
Again, this is just 100% planning out turns.
Well, it means it's not going to be a raid leader turn if they're sending the attacks through first. At least you'd hope.
Yeah, I was going to say, or if it is, it was bad.
You'd hope with the power of 4 minds that someone would have caught that you have to attack after you play the raid leader.
Would have been a great highlight, if not, though. Now, where do you sit on the value of Mind Control tech in this matchup? Do you want to wait till something's come down, or do you want to get ahead with just saying, you get -1 token, I get +1 token, and a 3/3?
So I think it's like, I think hand context is huge. I think if you don't have a Brawl, if you don't have a Reckless Flurry, you should try and be a little bit greedier and use it against their level up turn, right?
Exactly,
so like the power of the swing becomes a lot more powerful, but since New Zealand have the security to say, hey, if you have your level up turn, I can just Direhorn Hatchling in the way of it. I can Brawl it if I need to.
Right.
Dynamatic clears. I'm not necessarily going to be playing Mind Control tech on that turn anyway, so I'm just going to make the swing happen here.
All of these options are pretty good versus Paladin. It's a 2/6 lifesteal taunt. There's the Eternium Rover to gain armor, and there's one of my favorite cards, actually, the Security Rover, to just create more taunts. And with this Brawl, and most importantly, the Dynamatic, if New Zealand get time to just play a security rover, that could be a big problem for Spain to even get through these 2-3 taunts that get made, because it's quite difficult outside a level up for Spain to efficiently kill this rover with all of these little tokens. And it only snowballs to getting worse after that.
Yeah, it's the other upside of just playing out the mind control tech on the previous turn is that you curve so nicely into Dynamatic this way, because you have the option to trade away your minions where you see fit, and then you potentially you're able to clear a bigger board with Dynamatic that way.
We see the Fungomancer get coined out, which I think was the plan from almost turn 1 at this point. And landing not on the tokens, because the tokens have an inherent threat because of that level up card that's in the deck. Also so you want to spread your threats onto the minions that don't matter as much and say, well, normally you can't kill them all, so pick what you want to remove. There are pros and cons to both. Very strong turn, though, from Team Spain, and Team New Zealand have to sort of pay attention right now, because this is starting to stack up to just a lot of damage without a lot of commitment, to be completely honest. Comes the Dynamatic on turn 5, but with a 3-5 on the board. Ooh, never mind. That was absolutely perfect.
It's a mech.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
That's
a good play.
Card works. It is, yeah.
They didn't play around Dynamatic. What? I always forget that when I have another. I feel like it doesn't hit my own minions when I play Dynamatic every time, and it'll hit one. I'm like, oh yeah, it's mechs, not enemy minions. Mainly because I don't play Odd Warrior that much, I'll be completely honest.
But now, brushing that aside, we do have now potentially that Divine Favor setup that Spain have been looking for a long time. They've actually been quite fortunate, in fact, to have picked up double 1-drop. In the 2 turns since I called that out originally, they actually drew 1-drop, 1-drop to be able to go 1-1 Divine Favor after the Fungomancer turn, which I was talking about previously, which is honestly very, very strong in this position.
Also, funnily enough, the 2 1-drops just create the correct size board of 3 minions. So playing around Brawl, is it going to be Reckless Flurry? Probably not, because one's a 3-5 for a start. But wow, are they going like... okay. So now they're kind of, I feel at least, veering away a little bit from the hard Divine Favor cast. I wonder how that's going to play out going forward. The Security Rover being played, mainly because it's 5 health, means that there isn't a clean trade available on board, which means 2-3 taunts get summoned before that dies, on paper.
In theory, yes.
But we can see a Blessing of Might, of course, that can put paid to that plan and only deal with 1-2-3 taunt, but even that's a bit of a pain. Do they just send it all to the dome, as Mr. Admirable would say?
I think you then give your opponent a little bit too much control over the situation, because you know, the 2-5 into a 2-2 raid leader and summon a 2-3 taunt is just an incredible trade for New Zealand to be able to make.
This hurts, though.
It really does.
That's just a good card right now.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, this was not pleasant in any way, but losing your raid leader and then having to deal with the same situation next turn anyway, you'll probably just end up worse off.
Sure. I can see it. I always do consider just the face play when there's Leroy in hand, though. I will say that. It's always something to think about. Well, the board's been effectively remade to most extents as Spain be able to just press that button, as always, generate the 2 1-1s, and... Okay, Corridor Creeper is committed this turn, and again, maybe just a nod to saying, well, let's just keep empty in the hand. Azalina. Wait, what? Play around Divine Favor.
It sure would. New Zealand fire off the Omega Assembly for 1 again, and they do pick up another Dynamatic. Huge pickup for them.
That's why the card's so powerful. Is like the Warrior mechs are actually the only like class mechs that are very powerful, I would say. Because you know we can see a Paladin mech on the board, but it's not that much better than a 1-3, a natural 1-3, right?
Sure.
Or Tribeless, should I say. Okay, New Zealand choosing to just reduce the overall power of this board without committing to a card like Brawl. Also, it softens up a good chunk of the board for potentially this Dynamatic going forward.
Nice +1 attack on the Maul, though.
Spain have had their mauls treat them pretty well this game. The first one helping them build a board, the second one helping them to push with it. That is exactly what they wanted in this spot, and now they do find themselves a 4-card Divine Favor.
That's a good one.
Right on time.
This lines up extremely well with that maul draw. Now, look at the power. Suddenly, Fungomancer, Blessing of Might, Leroy Jenkins, a lot of just on-demand damage in most instances. Obviously, Fungomancer being a bit reliant on minion board.
Yeah.
But still, this is a lot of damage pushed that New Zealand kind of didn't want to take this turn, or shouldn't have took this turn in most circumstances. And now one of the issues is, based on New Zealand's hand, they can only do one thing this turn. They can Dynamatic, or they can Brawl, or they can Hatchling. You know, they can't do both. They can't Brawl into a Dynamatic to fully guarantee a clear on the board. Shield Block was a good pickup, though, because it still gives them the 5-mana options, as well as giving them one extra draw to see what happens.
Light the fuses!
See where this Dynamatic goes. Those 4 tokens want to go away as far as New Zealand are concerned. 3 out of 4, definitely not a bad outcome.
Yeah, reasonable for sure. New Zealand been very, very reserved with their Brawl usage this game, just trying to use their other removal where they can, and you can see them kind of paying for it with their health total, right? Not that I'm trying to present that as a bad thing, but they could quite easily be, you know, 5 or 10 points higher here, but without some of these powerful resources in hand.
Yeah, what surprises me about the holding of the Brawl, say, that turn, is that they've seen both Lost in the Jungles now, so there isn't the insta-build-a-board level-up turn to then Brawl. You just get 2 tokens a turn flat for the rest of the game, outside of played minions, of course. But they are running out of options. Now Spain just Fungomancer number 2. His minions just won't die. It's just 16. Get him. And I said about, do you just go face? You have to always consider it, because you always add in, apart from taunt sometimes, +6 to your damage from hand in any given turn because of Leroy. The Blessing of Might got a lot of work done there as well. And suddenly, New Zealand are in back in Paladin country, if you would like to call it as. They've just not been able to get a grasp and keep this board clear for more than a turn.
This is interesting, by the way, the summoning of the 2 additional 1/1s. I think Spain perhaps give credit to New Zealand for not having Brawl.
Right, because they dodged it.
Because of how greedy they've been with it. Those 2 1/1s did just create an outcome where the big board swing could come out. Imagine if this was a significantly bigger minion and not one of those tokens that didn't have to be summoned on the previous turn from Spain.
Yeah, I mean, they committed on the corridor creep, right? It was 8 attack in that minion alone, and I think we saw Dalesome just wince when there was the 1/1 left over, and I think there might have been a bit of, oh, we made that happen to a certain extent. We really did not need to press that button. Maybe Phantom Militia's the pick here, just for some overall, just build a board of your own, even though it's not the tokens you're after. It could get some help done, maybe even if you play it this turn. I think tokens are probably okay, actually. Just press the hero power.
Yeah, you're starting to reach the point now where one Brawl was used. One Brawl that you probably had a read your opponent didn't have in the first place because they were scrapping so hard for removal. Then that speaks to all the other tools of removal that they've used, right? A Dynamatic's been used, an extra Dynamatic has been used off in a Mega Assembly as well. So it's probably time for Spain to just giddy up and go in as hard as they can this thing.
Okay. Now they're asking the question, with these Dynamatics to a certain extent gone, can you even kill this Leroy? As we've mentioned earlier, this is not Warrior with Whirlwinds. They don't have it. It's pretty much reliant on a reckless flurry draw, but double Direhorn Hatchling is pretty good as far as I'm concerned, Sol. Do you think there's ever a thought of the Owl double trade into Leroy? I think I just like the double Direhorn a bit more. Because you can continue to gain armor from the Rover.
You get a value trade off the Rover that way.
I don't know.
It's not a value trade that kills a minion, but it sticks around on board and starts gaining more armor on top of that.
Does it mean that they can stagger their taunts? And I guess with Leroy down and there's Blessed of Might's gone, there's Maul's been used, there probably isn't just a lot of damage direct from hand available left in the deck. There's still Vine Cleavers that are around but haven't even been equipped yet. Spain playing 2 Vine Cleavers. There's still a Void Ripper for some shenanigans, but outside of that, we've seen pretty much most of the deck at this point. In terms of burst damage, at least. And now with this Phantom Militia, New Zealand are probably thinking, oh, that's more tokens that we don't want to deal with, and maybe we need a Reckless Flurry now. The positive is that Reckless Flurry does deal with the Phantom Militia health. They aren't just outside the range, so 1 armor up, even if they're starting from scratch, 1 tank up, 1 Reckless Flurry does clear off this board.
Spain just debating exactly what they want to commit here. Akaris Veteran is a weird card in that, you know, normally back in the day, like Abusive Sergeant was always this card that you played last because it had so much tempo coming onto the board that it was always better to develop other minions first. But since so many 1-drops now have 1 attack, they're actually getting an Akaris Veteran on board first, and because the buff is permanent, it can actually have some merit to be played out, not as the last card.
It's proactive, not reactive, right? Ooh. Huh. Went for the Primordial. This second Dion Hatchling, along with the Stonehill, of course, from Team New Zealand, probably thinking, nah, they've not got us this turn. Primordial Drake does so much work against Odd Paladin. That means that, yeah, if they don't have us this turn, and they don't have us next turn, do we just win? And I think that's a very valid question, because I think the answer is yes, I think they do just win if they survive 2 more turns.
Would you like to change your mind based on the draw of a Vine Cleaver?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because they still have to get through a Primordial Drake.
Yeah.
They haven't got Tarim off a Stonehill.
Yeah.
And that's 2 swings. The Primordial Drake's still doing stuff, and they've tanked up at that point.
Okay.
So I think the health is already on 20. Will get even higher, and they still have to get through these taunts, and then the 2 Matriarchs in the deck that they can draw.
There are also, I believe, still 2 level ups in Spain's deck that they can draw, which in combination with the Vine Cleaver will be huge with no, you know, mass AoE removal currently for New Zealand.
So that'll be the last gambit because the Lost in the Jungles are gone. So there's no hero power Lost in the Jungle level up, which is still 4 tokens, very powerful. But yeah, this Vine Cleaver is going to have to do a lot of cleaving of vines and cleaving of New Zealand at this point, because this is pretty much the last-ditched attempt that Team Spain have to even win this game and survive in this tournament. Oh, Eternium Rover as well, not bad.
I just want to point out, Spain, be it by design or not, actually played very nicely around Primordial Drake this turn. Like, this still looks like a great Primordial Drake, don't get me wrong, but the fact that they left a 2-3 in play and then didn't trade their Divine Shield was actually about as well positioned as they could have been.
Yeah, I was going to say, it could have been worse is the point, right? Could have been a lot worse. This Rover, though, yes, you make your 1-1s, friend. Second Vine Cleaver. More of an insurance policy at this point, because there are still 2 whole swings of this one. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, although I'll double check. Oh, there is no weapon. Oh, sorry, there is an ooze left in Spain's deck. They didn't ooze earlier, right? I'm not going crazy.
New Zealand's deck, you mean?
Sorry, New Zealand's deck. Ooh.
There's the Elise, but there is no removal option in hand right now for Mage and for New Zealand, and they will know that they have yet to be leveled up this game, which means that they are staring down a potentially lethal board even on the following turn.
They must be terrified, I'm going to be honest. Also, so the problem with Elise is it shuffles a pack, which, yes, a pack's good, it gets you a lot of cards in hand, but you've also got removal tools in your deck and taunts that you want to draw instead of a pack of Ungoro cards.
Yeah. Thankfully, due to the power of Tank Up and the Eternium Rover trade, they do get well out of range of any likely lethal, even with their level up plus another card. Still, Spain are just having to soldier on right now with basically the deck the card that makes this entire deck function. Like, without level up, this really wouldn't be a deck that you considered playing. And Spain are currently making a really good go of outlasting one of the most late-game decks in existence without having access to it.
Yeah, and I think, funnily enough, Spain might skip equipping this Vine Cleaver this turn and bank at least 1 swing, guaranteed. next turn no matter what.
You have 2 level ups in your deck, though. What if you draw one of them on the next turn and you don't have the Vine Cleaver equipped already?
What if your Vine Cleaver dies before you can even swing at all?
Then you got 2 extra 1/1s out of it? I don't know.
But you didn't. But you didn't, right? Because you can't swing this turn. They've already swung.
No, you're right.
Let me think.
Tough one, really is. And I think that's the whole discussion right now is: do we float 7 mana we don't need to?
I don't like this. I personally think I'm equipping the Vine Cleaver here because, like, I don't know exactly how many cards are left. We don't have the info on screen, but the Warrior has drawn so many fewer cards than you have, right? Because you've cast Divine Favor this game. You have 2 level ups in your deck. They have 1 ooze. As the aggro deck, I'm down to take risks here and just play to the level up top deck.
Oh, it's actually not a bad turn. Wait, do they want to take 9? Probably have to, right? The Void Ripper and the Vine Cleaver. Trade the 2/1 and the weapon in. Take 8, sorry, because they attacked him first. Apologies. So if they choose to go for the minion attacks, they end up with 1 minion left on the board. If they don't, they keep the full board. But then again, the Vine Cleaver creates an additional +2 minions anyway. So I think I like preserving the health here.
And by the way, since we debated this so heavily on the previous turn, if this Vine Cleaver was equipped on the turn before, you have enough mana this turn to then hero power as well.
Yeah.
So not equipping it on the previous turn, not only does it not play to a level up top deck on the turn immediately afterwards, it also plays worse into level up top decks for the preceding turns that come afterwards, right? You actually cut yourself back on 1/1s over the course of the game.
Definitely true. This Dynamatic, though, kind of a weird moment here, because if this Righteous Protector wasn't on the board, this turn could be nice because you could trade the Elise into the 3/3 and just guarantee a clear. Yeah. But with this Elise now, it just feels awkward. You could end up just killing off your own minion if you're a little bit unfortunate and leaving stuff on the board for your opponent. It's very scary. Sol here looking up into the sky doing the odds.
Yeah, I'm
going to commentate that instead.
I know I wasn't. I was
numbers 1, 2, 5, 6.
Thinking about Baku play instead. Like potentially, like how likely are you to die, which I believe is exactly 0% in that position, and then you're actually just setting up lethal for yourself potentially. You're making the Paladin scared of being aggressive.
Okay.
I think the fear is that it doesn't directly set up lethal for the following turn, so if they then do it, they don't really prevent Riku and Spain from going really wide on the board following that.
They miss 4 armor.
Then so they are dead to level up for sure, but level up just does not want to come for Spain this game.
It's pretty incredible, to be honest. This is just Baku Wars now.
Yeah.
This board can be cleared up. On New Zealand side, at least, with Elise and the Dynamatic being gone, because this Void Ripper did live and be able to clear this off. I think you may as well. There's no great answers to this 7/8 now, apart from a Shield Slam. And this draw's huge.
Reckless Flurry.
I mean, you have to, right?
If you're playing Baku this turn, I think you really had to consider playing Baku last turn, because it's a very similar spot to what you were in, and that 1 card of difference might have come back to bite New Zealand in this spot.
Level Up finally turns up. Quite rightly so, as I believe there's like 3 cards left or something in at Team Spain's deck. Maybe a couple more, but certainly not many. Funnily enough, the trades become a bit strange, right?
Trades, you say?
Well, I'm saying, I think you have to just quickly think about, I don't think it can be done, but think about if you hit them down to 0 armor and you level up, then Hero Power, Reckless Flurry happens, and they have a Baku. So is there anything else that can clear off?
You also have a Baku.
Is there anything else along with that that kills your own Baku and leaves theirs alive? That's the problem. Like a Shield Slam.
I think if you're in a world where you're playing against like 3 cards from the Warrior and you think they're like an exact 3-card combo
look,
that's going to
when you're in these situations, tournament life on the line, you do think about these things.
You do, but then you also have someone alongside you telling you you're being stupid.
And we just displayed exactly how HGG team works.
That was my point.
Oh, Ziliax. A great pickup. There's the Hero Power Flurry. Is this like a pass? As in 0 attacks from Ziliax? They've used the Owl, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any merit in gaining the 3 right now.
I think I want to soak 2 attacks. If I was on New Zealand, I would not want them to soak 2 attacks.
Yeah.
And look at the level of conversation between Team Spain. Delson's like what's going on? What's happening?
They were back-to-back 2 level ups in a row, and actually rewinding. I think the one turn where Baku wasn't played, and then the turn after where Baku was played, and I kind of called out like what was the difference between those 2 turns. Actually, the 1 card draw in between there was the Reckless Flurry. And I said when you play the Baku the first time, your opponent goes really wide, and then you can't answer that. You're not setting up lethal. New Zealand drew the Reckless Flurry, and I think that was their trigger point to then say, okay, now we can go for the Baku, because all they can do against this is just spread wide, and then we have our AoE turn, and then we end the game.
Okay, this next draw could just decide the game at this point. Extremely close with both players on extremely low health. And that is just lethal. The Super Collider is going to clear off the 3-3s, get rid of those taunts, and Baku is going to go to face for one of these teams, and New Zealand survive at the Hearthstone Global Games on their first match on stage. A 3-2 victory for New Zealand over Spain.
I just want to point out, like, judge from the player cam reactions there, which of those teams were actually victorious.
I think both, or at least New Zealand, are just relieved more than anything.
Yeah.
Because that game felt like it was very intense. We said there were ways for both decks to win. It's not an easy like, well, this deck just wins this matchup.
Yeah.
But I think that like showed it to the extreme extent of what that matchup could do. At both points, we're like, oh yeah, you know, the Paladin's looking great here. They're probably going to win. And then the Warrior's looking great here, is probably going to win. And then that just continued up until literally the last turn when that Super Collider cleared off the taunts. Wow, what a game.
Yeah, that's the thing, as the Warrior, you're always like 1 Dynamatic or 1 Reckless Flurry or 1 Brawl away from being in a good position, you know? And I think they were so greedy with their Brawl in that spot. The Murloc Mage was earlier, guys. Come on, give us a break. They were
You're late.
They were so greedy with that Brawl that I believe they actually convinced Spain that it wasn't in hand there.
Right.
And they got a really, really strong Brawl payout where Spain perhaps committed 2 1-1s to the board that didn't need to go there.
And it showed that, you know, maybe the whole game, if we could know these things, which we cannot, maybe that was the turn that switched up enough of the game and relieved enough pressure. There was an 8-attack minion on the board for Spain. If that hits one more time, and then you fast forward the game, well, maybe they just die even without the double level up early on. We don't know, because we can't see that. We can definitely see these Murlocs, though.
I think the other key turn that needs shouting out is the timing of that Baku. Because I think it's very possible that, like, I playing alone would have got baited that game and thought, like, that was the Baku turn, play it. Actually, as it turns out, my next card would have been Reckless Flurry in that spot, but let's say it wasn't. Then suddenly I'm in a spot where my opponent has gone very wide on the board, I can't answer it, their level up comes out, and I just die. Yeah. Whereas New Zealand waited for that security of knowing that they could AoE the big push turn before playing their Baku, and it was that Baku timing that ended up being game-winning for New Zealand.
Yeah, and it definitely shows how different and how varied a lot of the matchups are in the current meta, because we had some very quick wins. Murloc Mage, for example, against the Warlock, what feels oh so long ago right now, at the very beginning of this series. That was a very just, okay, the Murloc's just kind of overran the Warlock, done. But then we see a matchup like that, which is a control deck that beats aggro decks to a certain extent, going to fatigue almost. It was like, this doesn't happen, does it? But again, Spain, if they got level up any earlier, if they got a Vine Cleaver much earlier, because they did the 2 Vine Cleavers, one were back-to-back, which is not really what you want, as that's just a dead draw for a turn or so, but also still quite late in the game, so everything could have just been mixed up and changed, but it was a very close one in the end.
It was, and my heart goes out to Spain. You know, they gave it their best. It's a great achievement to have got here, but it's all about New Zealand at this point, and I believe Frodan is standing by with New Zealand, so we can hear from them.
All right, thank you very much, Raven and Sada. I'm joined by New Zealand, who's able to stave off elimination match. and fight for another chance in the top 4. I'm joined by Jack Attack, one of the members who also won a tour stop earlier this year at HCT Australia. So Jack, talk to me a little bit about going to that match up against Spain, who had a little bit of unconventional choices.
Yeah, it was quite odd. The pick ban did not go any way that we've seen before. They had the most unique pick ban strategy, different priorities, like the first ban Shaman totally surprised us. But then after we came out of the pick ban, we thought we had some pretty good favorable matchups, and even though it came down to the wire, we felt pretty good about it.
Now, talk to me a little bit about your team dynamic. One thing is, I know you're a very playful guy, like, teasing your other members, but, one thing I also noticed is that Mage is, really out there, and he's playing a lot and communicating, and I know that something during the group stage was Mage wasn't always there, so at the same time, having him here must be really big for your team, right? Yeah,
we thought having Mage here was really big, but then after we lost the first game, maybe he was, the anchor holding us back the whole time. We couldn't really figure that one out, but, we got Ting Tong here, the deck crafting expert in Parthra with the audience with those great New Zealand flags over there. So altogether, pretty good, complete package.
That's right. Shout out to the crowd. There's definitely some loyal New Zealand fans out here cheering for you guys, and that must give you an extra sense of pride when you're winning on the big stage, right?
Yeah, well, they can't cheer for Team USA anymore, so we're the next best thing.
The other country that speaks English with a really funny accent. So congratulations on your win and good luck in your next match. For now, we're going to get ready for our second match here at the Hearthstone Global Game Finals, which will be Singapore versus Bulgaria. Stay tuned. You're watching more Hearthstone action live from BlizzCon 2018.